John Anthony Tenta Jr. was a Canadian professional wrestler and sumo tori, best known for his work in World Wrestling Entertainment as Earthquake. After a promising start to his sumo career using the name Koto Tenta, Tenta switched to professional wrestling and became a high-profile star for the WWE, feuding with Hulk Hogan and winning the WWF Tag Team Championship with partner and personal friend Typhoon. His professional wrestling career also encompassed runs with World Championship Wrestling, where he was known as Avalanche and the Shark, All Japan Pro Wrestling, and a return to WWE as Golga. John Tenta was born in Surrey, British Columbia on June 22, 1963, named after his father. He was a large baby weighing 11 pounds 3 ounces at birth. Inspired by professional wrestlers Gene Kiniski and Don Leo Jonathan, John decided to pursue professional wrestling at the age of 6. John started making headlines in 1978 at the age of 15 as a member of the Cloverdale Community School rugby team, winning the 1978 Fraser Valley Junior High School rugby title, and later as a member of the Surrey Beavers Rugby Club and barely missing the 1979 Provincials. John learned freestyle wrestling at North Surrey Secondary, and in 1980 he celebrated his 17th birthday in Japan by winning a gold medal in the over 87 kilograms class of the World Elite Wrestling Championships, after wrestling for less than a year. The following year in 1981, John became a Canadian junior champion shortly after his 18th birthday. John finished 6th in the super heavyweight category at the World Junior Wrestling Championships. He then won an athletic scholarship to Louisiana State University, where he competed in NCAA level collegiate wrestling. At LSU, he was nicknamed Big John, lettering on the Tiger varsity wrestling team and participating on the football team. In 1985, LSU had dropped varsity wrestling to comply with the Title 1X, forcing him to choose a new sport. John then walked on to the LSU football team, where he played some junior varsity games as a defensive lineman. He was also known as a quiet giant, while employed as a bouncer at an LSU college bar called the Bengal. John also played rugby for the LSU Rugby Club. One day on campus, John saw some white students threatening a young black man. They found out the hard way that John didn't tolerate racism. John then moved to Japan to pursue a career in sumo wrestling after being recruited by a former Yokozuna who met John on a trip to Vancouver. In October 1985, he joined a sumo stable, Sarogatake, run by a former Yokozuna. Following tradition, the young sumo tori took the name Koto Tenta, translated as Tenta the Harp. Beginning the sport at age 22, he entered nearly 7 years later than many non-college aspirants. The combination of his size and training as a wrestler were to his advantage in learning and advancing in the sport. The novice won all of his 24 bouts during his 8-month active career, and later renamed Koto Tensei Heavenly Mountain Harp. The novelty of being a rare Westerner sumo tori in the mid-1980s and the third ever Caucasian garnered him press coverage, and he earned the additional nickname of the Canadian Comet. Despite doing well as a newcomer, he soon quit the sport due to the difficulty of the sumo lifestyle and the toll of the hard ring surface was taking on his body. In addition, the sumo world frowned on the large tattoo of a tiger on his left bicep, and though he covered it during his matches, would have required him to remove it via skin graft before moving up to the higher level competitions. In Japan, tattoos are associated with gangsters, and public display is widely prohibited. After leaving sumo, John quickly signed up for Japanese pro wrestling under the tutelage of the Giant Baba. He made his professional wrestling debut with All Japan Pro Wrestling on May 1, 1987, teaming with Giant Baba and defeating Hana Kimura and Goro Tsurumi. Tenta had a solid 18-month career, teaming with popular Japanese wrestlers Giant Baba, Jumbo Tsuruta, and the Great Kabuki, before getting the attention of American pro wrestling promoters, as well making tours in Vancouver for Al Tomko's All-Star Wrestling, where he competed as a babyface, but later turned heel when he began being managed by Gentleman Jonathan Sayers. After making 2 dark match appearances under his real name in March 1989, John joined the WWE full-time in September 1989. In his first match after signing on, a dark match on September 21st, 1989, he was known as Earthquake Evans and managed by Slick. John then made his WWF televised debut on the November 11th, 1989 edition of WWF Superstars of Wrestling, where he was planted in the audience as a normal spectator at the taping held in Wheeling, West Virginia. During an in-ring interview with Gene Okerlund, Dino Bravo challenged the Ultimate Warrior to a strength competition. In order to demonstrate, he had to sit on Dino Bravo's back as he did a set of push-ups. During the Ultimate Warrior set, Canadian Earthquake, and by WrestleMania 6, simply Earthquake, an unstoppable monster heel who often sent his opponents out on a stretcher after repeatedly hitting them with his sit-down splash. Earthquake's first pay-per-view appearance was when he replaced Barry Windham on Randy Savage's team at the 1989 Survivor Series. Earthquake eliminated Hercules and survived the match along with Savage and Dino Bravo. He made his WrestleMania debut at WrestleMania 6, defeating Hercules. John's career peaked when he entered a feud with Hulk Hogan. The feud exploded in May 1990 when Earthquake snuck up on Hogan from behind during a segment of the Brother Love Show and repeatedly crushed Hogan's ribs with his Earthquake splash. Eventually, Hogan recovered and gained revenge on Earthquake and defeated him in a series of matches across the country, starting with Hogan's count-out victory on SummerSlam 1990. Hogan and Earthquake were the final two participants in the 1991 Royal Rumble, with Hogan getting the victory. After his stint with Hogan, Earthquake attained another WrestleMania victory, defeating former Hart stablemate Greg Valentine at WrestleMania 7. On April 1, 1991, WWE held a joint show in Kobe with Japanese promotion Super World of Sports called SWS Wrestle Dream. Earthquake appeared to face Kojo Kitao in a battle of two former sumo wrestlers. Kitao and Tenta broke kayfabe by being uncooperative with each other. Kitao didn't sell Earthquake's attacks and shot on him. The match ended when Kitao was disqualified for kicking the referee. After the match, Kitao immediately grabbed the microphone and began telling the audience that wrestling is fake and that John Tenta could never really beat him. As other Japanese wrestlers attempted to restrain him, the incident led to Kitao being fired from SWS. After WrestleMania 7, Earthquake instigated a feud with Jake the Snake Roberts when in their match that aired on WWF Superstars of Intro to the Summer. Later in 1991, Earthquake formed a tag team with Typhoon, also known as Tugboat, also known as the Shockmaster, calling themselves the Natural Disasters, managed by Jimmy Hart. Initially a heel team, the duo feuded with the Legion of Doom over the WWF World Tag Team Championship, but were unsuccessful. Later, the Disasters turned face when Jimmy Hart betrayed them and joined forces with Money Inc., a team composed of Irwin R. Shyster and Ted DiBiase. Money Inc. had just won the tag team titles from Legion of Doom. At WrestleMania 7, they defeated Money Inc. by countout but did not win the titles. Although Earthquake and Typhoon eventually won the tag team titles, it wasn't long before Money Inc. regained the belts. John left the WWF in January 1993 after losing via countout to Bam Bam Bigelow, the night after the Royal Rumble, for a spell in Japan for war. He also had a brief stint in CMLL in late 1993, and a visit home to Surrey, British Columbia. John returned to the WWE in January 1994 when he assisted Bret Hart in a match with Shawn Michaels by countering Diesel's interference. He defeated Adam Bomb in a quick squash match at WrestleMania 10. He then engaged in a short feud with Yokozuna, with whom he had a sumo match on Raw. John Tenta's sumo background was also revealed, and he won the sumo match. Earthquake was scheduled to face Owen Hart in a King of the Ring qualifying match. However, during a May 14, 1994 house show in San Jose, California, Earthquake was injured by Yokozuna and crushed. Footage of Yokozuna hitting a banzai drop at the show was televised before the qualifying match to explain his absence, in which Doink the Clown was his replacement. He again disappeared from the WWE thereafter and returned to Japan for WAR. John then contacted World Championship Wrestling. Hulk Hogan, a longtime friend, lobbied to have John come in, and so John joined WCW. Before joining WCW, John worked a tour of Japan for UWF International, where he teamed up with Super Vader. John was introduced as Avalanche and was a member of Kevin Sullivan's Three Faces of Fear. He later aligned with Big Bubba Rogers and feuded with Sting and Randy Savage. At Clash of Champions 29, Avalanche, The Butcher, and Kevin Sullivan faced Hulk Hogan, Sting, and David Sullivan in a 6-man tag team match, with Mr. T as a special guest referee, but lost the match. At Starrcade 1994, Avalanche lost to Sting by disqualification. At Super Brawl 10, Avalanche and Big Bubba Rogers faced Sting and Randy Savage, but lost when Sting pinned Avalanche. At Uncensored 1995, Avalanche faced Randy Savage, but lost by disqualification. The Avalanche name was then dropped after WWE threatened legal action over similarities to the Earthquake character. John returned under the ring name The Shark and joined the Dungeon of Doom faction. He believed this could be the beginning of a long-term gimmick and even changed the tattoo on his arm from an LSU tiger to that of a shark, a process that took 24 hours. Rumors were that WCW management forced him to do that, but in reality, it was John himself that brought up the idea. At Fall Brawl 1995, John teamed with other members of the Dungeon of Doom, Kamala, the Zodiac, Ming, and the Taskmaster to face the Hulkamaniacs, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Lex Luger, and Sting, in a War Games match where they lost. On the October 9th, 1995 edition of WCW Monday Nitro, Shark faced Sting for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship, but failed to win the title. Shark competed in the WCW World War III 60-man Battle Royal for the vacant WCW World Heavyweight Championship, which was won by Randy Savage. John eventually left the Dungeon of Doom and wrestled under his real name after delivering a promo about the many names and gimmicks he had been forced into the past, including the infamous line,
"I'm not the shark. I'm not a fish. I'm not an avalanche. I'm a man. John Tenta."
At the 1996 Great American Bash, he defeated Big Bubba Rogers. After the match, John Tenta cut Rogers' goatee with a pair of scissors. At Bash of the Beach 1996, John defeated Big Bubba Rogers in a Carson City Silver Dollar match. On the July 1996 edition of Nitro, John got a shot at the WCW World Heavyweight Championship against a Giant but failed to win the title. Following the match with the Dungeon of Doom's jumped his beard as well after John lost another match to the Giant. In the spring of 1987, John joined Roddy Piper as a member of his family. The angle was quickly dropped and Piper instead joined forces with the Four Horsemen, helping the members of his family. John left WCW in early 1997. After his feud with Big Bubba Rogers, John then resurfaced in the WWE on the May 25, 1998 edition of Raw's War under the name Golga. He wrestled under a mask as one of the oddities, and the character had a fascination with Eric Cartman from the TV series South Park. The gimmick was given to John because he lost a considerable amount of weight, so much that the WWE thought it wouldn't be believable for John to reprise the Earthquake gimmick with the weight loss. At SummerSlam, the Oddities defeated Kai and Tai in a handicap match, and at the 1998 Rock Bottom pay-per-view held in Vancouver, British Columbia, Golga and Kurgan squared off against the Headbangers in a tag team match. When Golga was tagged, fans chanted Earthquake, and John received the biggest reaction of the match, but nonetheless was pinned by Thrasher. And at the 1999 Royal Rumble, Golga competed in the 30-wrestler Royal Rumble match, entering number 3, but was quickly eliminated by Steve Austin. The Oddities disappeared in the beginning of 1999 with all the members being released. He did, however, return to the WWE one last time in 2001 with the Earthquake gimmick, where he's one of the participants of the 20-man gimmick Battle Royal match at WrestleMania 17, being eliminated by Kamala. In December of the same year, he also worked a dark match against Tank Malachi before an episode of SmackDown. John Tenta's professional wrestling career garnered him appearances in several video games. In 1991, Earthquake was portrayed as a featured character in Tecmo's popular arcade video game WWF WrestleFest. He was also included in the 1992 home video game WWF Super WrestleMania by Flying Edge for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. In 2004, the Japanese video game developer Spike released King of Colosseum 2 for PlayStation 2 that featured John as an unlockable character. It was a Japan-only release. John retired from wrestling in 2004 and opened a wrestling school, but the plans came to a halt after it was revealed he had developed bladder cancer and was told he had a 20% chance to live, assuming he continued with his chemotherapy treatments. During his November 15, 2005 interview with WrestleCrap Radio, John announced that a recent radiation dosage did not go as planned and had no effect on the tumor. He also announced he had multiple tumors and had spread to his lungs. Over the next several months, John spent countless hours contributing to a popular wrestling forum, posting updates on his fight with cancer, chatting with fans, and developing personal friendships with many. Sadly, John lost his battle with cancer on June 7, 2006 at the age of 42. Many superstars, including Bret Hart, Jim Cornette, and Stevie Ray, among others, described John as one of the nicest guys they ever met. Behind the scenes, John was known as a family man who was easy to deal with and always did what was best for the business. John was also named honorary chairman of the 1986 BC Championships for the Disabled. He was married and had 3 children. The first public notice of John's death was posted that day on WWE.com. On the June 9, 2006 edition of SmackDown and the June 12, 2006 edition of Raw, WWE showed a bumper that read "R.I.P. Earthquake John Tenta" before each show began. Alan James Coage was a judoka and later professional wrestler. He won medals for the United States at several international judo competitions, including the heavyweight bronze medal at the 1976 Summer Olympics, becoming the second American to win a medal in judo. He later appeared in wrestling promotions such as the World Wrestling Federation, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Stampede Wrestling, and Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling under the ring names Bad News Brown, Buffalo Allen, and Bad News Allen, and many say was a blueprint to the Stone Cold Steve Austin character. So tell your grandmother, your 3-legged dog, and that ugly goldfish you got. This is the untold story of Alan Coage, aka Bad News Allen. Alan was born in Harlem, New York City in 1943 and raised in St. Albans, Queens, which at the time was considered a disadvantaged neighborhood. He attended Thomas Edison High School and hung around with a gang called the Scotchman Lords. In 1944, his father, Howard Allen Coage, was arrested and jailed for the illegal sale of beer, wine, and liquor. Alan was also routinely arrested several times and once spent a few days in a youth house where he was shocked with a vision of what could have been his future: drugs, jail, and death. At the age of 15, Alan began training in judo under Jerome McKay after seeing a poster for McKay's dojo on the New York City subway that read, "Don't let the hood beat you up and take your money." Many others saw McKay's poster, but unlike most who just took a lesson or two and hoped God would award them with a black belt, Alan was different. He immediately began an intensive training schedule of 4 days a week, 3 hours per day. He stuck to the schedule like a postman, rain, shine, sleet, or snow. This regimen allowed Alan to win first place at the Chicago Invitational Tournament after only 7 months of training, despite being only a white belt. Within 2.5 years, he would earn his black belt and named a Sandan. During high school, he was a thin pupil with a lack of confidence who would play handball, baseball, and basketball in his battles to prove himself. Described as a loner and rarely attending social events, as most of his friends were other judo students. He also spent much of his time going around to disadvantaged neighborhoods of his youth, doing his best to help at-risk youngsters who needed the kind of inspiration Al had never received as a young child. He would continue to do this in his free time without any benefit, fanfare, or publicity. Alan remained humble to the point where one of his fellow judokas would brag about his accomplishments, since he usually kept them to himself. His instructors would comment on how courteous and respectful he was, while most athletes his age level were flamboyant and cocky. Alan would continue his rigorous workout routine and adding a 2-mile run every night. Alan was inspired by meeting George Harris, who in 1961 was the last American to win a U.S. Grand Championship. After graduating in 1962 and majoring in electrical insulation, Alan got a job working in a bakery in Long Island, following in his father's footsteps. He attended the Manhattan Food Trade School, eventually becoming a foreman, but deep down inside had much bigger aspirations. In 1970, Allen relocated to Japan for 2 years, where he studied at the Nihon University, majoring and minoring in Judo. In 1972, he narrowly missed making the Olympic team when he was beaten and suffered a knee injury. In 1975, Allen worked part-time as a bodyguard for Aretha Franklin, but in October of that same year, he struck gold in the heavyweight judo category in the Pan Am Games in Mexico City. When the team arrived in Mexico, Allen's roommate was Jimmy Martin, who was 138 pounds, loud and wisecracking, described as a poor man's Jim Cagney. A contrast to Allen, who was big, quiet, and soft-spoken, but the difference did not hinder Allen. In July of 1976, at the age of 32, Allen had been working as a bouncer at Julio's Warrenville Inn for the previous 3 years, and word got around he was not someone to mess around with. During the 1976 National AAU Championships in Baltimore, Allen failed to place in the heavyweight division after losing in an early round decision. In spite of all this, the American coaches felt that Allen would be the committee's wild card pick. After a meeting held immediately after the championships, due to his impressive credentials, the committee voted to move Allen to the open class section. That year at the Olympics in Montreal would be his first Olympic berth. This time he was down to 200 pounds in a lower weight class, where he would win a bronze medal. His victory made him the first African American to win a solo Olympic Games medal in a sport other than boxing or track and field. In 1976, along with former Olympic decathlon winner Milt Campbell, Allen received keys to the city of Plainville, New Jersey, presented by Mayor Paul J. O'Keefe. He was also invited to the White House by President Ford, but was discouraged he still wasn't able to make a living with the sport he loved and had to have a full-time job as either a bouncer or bodyguard. Allen retired from competitive judo following the 1976 Olympics due to financial frustrations and all-around internal politics. Allen's ride in judo was even more remarkable than the record indicates, as he was by no means a natural. He admitted to putting on a tough guy attitude as a teenager because he was afraid to let people see how inadequate he felt about himself. In October of 1977, Allen made his way to Japan, where he began training as a professional wrestler under Antonio Inoki in the New Japan Pro Wrestling Dojo. In 1977, he would debut under the ring name Buffalo Allen. Optimistic he would finally be able to make a living at something he loved doing. Now at over 260 pounds and bench pressing over 400 pounds, he was also squatting over 600 pounds. Allen made a one-off appearance in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in February 1978, defeating jobber Frank Williams at a live event. He returned to the promotion in January of 1979 under the name Big Allen Coage and wrestled for the WWF for the remainder of the year, appearing on several episodes of WWF Championship Wrestling. In late 1979 at Madison Square Gardens, teaming with JoJo Andrews, Allen challenged for the Tag Team Championship against Riki Choshu and Seiji Sakaguchi. Coage's team was unsuccessful when Andrews submitted to a Boston Crab by Sakaguchi in a match that lasted just under 10 minutes. In 1982, Allen found a long-term home in Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling. While working for Stu Hart in his Stampede Wrestling promotion, Allen was suspended, quote-unquote, indefinitely by the commission, along with Archie the Stomper Goldie, for violating wrestling regulations during a bout earlier that month, using weapons in a match including a chair, cane, and a fork. While attacking each other, fans were shooken up, and a 14-year-old girl had her leg pinned under a chair while being trampled by other fans, but was not seriously injured. Stu Hart also reportedly had his license suspended because of the incident, and the commission ruled he would have to pay $10,000 to get it back. Allen also reportedly grabbed an elderly man in the audience and shook him. Allen, the Stomper, and even referee Cedric Hathaway were all suspended. Behind the scenes, Stu Hart was negotiating a deal with Vince McMahon to sell the promotion to the WWF. In 1984, he was back working for Stampede Wrestling when Vince McMahon reneged on the agreement. Allen remained with Stampede until 1988, with some tours of Australia, Florida, and had matches with wrestlers such as the Dynamite Kid and Bret Hart. He often referred to himself in interviews as the Ultimate Warrior. Allen returned to the World Wrestling Federation in early 1988 as Bad News Brown, and it was during that time he achieved his greatest notoriety. His trademark characteristic as Bad News Brown was never smiling. Either he kept an angry face or laughed loud at the expense of opponents' misfortunes. While the roster was mostly filled with ultra-virtuous baby faces and cowardly and monster heels, Bad News was something entirely different, a tough loner. While other heels were likely to form alliances with one another, Bad News was reclusive. Some say this was a blueprint to the Stone Cold Steve Austin character. His dislike for all fellow wrestlers was clear when he abandoned his team at the Survivor Series. Some memorable moments from his WWF tenure included winning the Battle Royal by eliminating Bret Hart, who was then a heel after a sneak attack, followed by a brief feud with WWF champion Macho Man Randy Savage and his manager Miss Elizabeth in late 1988 that led to more main event matches. On the March 11, 1989 edition of Saturday Night's Main Event, Bad News memorably took a microphone towards the end of his match with Hulk Hogan and told him that it was time for the Ghetto Blaster. As he was getting ready to execute it, however, Hogan got out of the way, leading to him miss the move and suffer an eventual loss. Allen's next feud was with Rowdy Roddy Piper, starting at the 1990 Royal Rumble, where he was eliminated by Piper, then illegally eliminated Piper. This led to Allen being ridiculed, which he would counter by calling Piper out for wearing a skirt. This culminated at WrestleMania 11, in which a match both men were counted out. Allen was initially planned to continue the feud with Piper, but since neither man would agree to lose to each other, the program was scrapped and instead Allen was assigned to work with Jake the Snake Roberts, where Bad News used a sewer rat against Jake Snake. Around this time, Allen was worked into a storyline where he attacked WWF President Jack Tunney on the Brother Love Show. Allen eventually left the WWF after SummerSlam 1990, claiming Vince McMahon failed to live up to his promises to make him the company's first African-American champion, which reportedly affected him and his wife. As written in the autobiography of the Dynamite Kid, Allen's legitimate toughness was displayed in a confrontation involving Andre the Giant, who allegedly made a racist comment on a tour bus for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Allen overheard it and made the driver stop the bus, walked off, and demanded the Giant get off and fight him one-on-one. Andre would not move from his seat and later apologized for the remark. In 1993, Allen was inducted into the Judo Hall of Fame as well as the Black Belt Magazine Hall of Fame. Allen continued to work in independent promotions for several more years, including Japan's Shoot Wrestling, UWFI promotion. In 1994, he worked in South Africa and feuded with former Stampede wrestler Gama Singh. He also appeared in Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling, where he was their heavyweight champion. He also worked for Tokyo Pro Wrestling from 1997 to 1998 and worked in independent shows in Calgary and Western Canada. Stampede Wrestling made a brief return in 1999, where he was a color commentator along with Mauro Ranallo. Allen retired in 1999 due to knee damage. His last match was May of that year in Regina, Saskatchewan. He continued occasionally working independent shows for friends while living in Calgary with his wife and had considered starting a promotion himself. Allen died of a heart attack on the morning of March 6, 2007 at Rocky View General Hospital in Calgary, minutes after being rushed there due to chest pain. 3 weeks prior to his death, he had undergone a hip replacement surgery. On May 24, 2007, a memorial show was held which drew over 600 fans, promoted by Devin Hannibal Nicholson, who faced Abdullah the Butcher in the main event. Also on the card, Samoa Joe, Tito Santana, and Jim Neidhart, among others. It was reported Goldust, who was scheduled to perform, was paid $800 in advance, no-showed the event, as well cashed in his plane ticket for an additional $900. At one point, Rick Bogner and Allen ran a wrestling school out of Calgary, Alberta. He was working on a book about his career and other wrestling stories just before his death. That was the untold story of Bad News Allen. Louis Vincent Albano was an Italian-American professional wrestler, manager, and actor who performed under the name Captain Lou Albano. After being expelled from the University of Tennessee for attempting to cheat on a final exam, and then joining the Army only to be honorably discharged 8 months later, Lou began training in 1953 as a boxer, but the promoters were hesitant because he was under 6 feet, so future WWF President Willie Gilzenberg encouraged him to get into wrestling. Originally billed as Leaping Lou Albano, the Mount Vernon Mauler, and later Lou Albano, using a gangster image until real members of the Mafia requested him to change his gimmick. Having little success as a wrestler, he became a manager at the suggestion of Bruno Sammartino and went on to manage over a dozen tag team champions spanning over 4 decades. After starring in a Cyndi Lauper video in the mid-1980s, the two became very close friends, and he was instrumental in the creation of the Rock and Wrestling Connection, which defined pop culture during the 1980s. He appeared in several movies and TV shows, as well as the host of the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. According to Dave Meltzer, without Lou Albano, wrestling history would have been monumentally different. One of the most iconic personalities and most influential managers ever in the history of the business, often imitated and never duplicated, this is the untold story of Captain Lou Albano. Lou was born in Rome, Italy on July 29, 1933. Though his parents were both American-born, his family was in Italy at the time of his birth while his father pursued his medical degree. His mother, Eleanor, was a classic concert pianist who had performed at the Carnegie Hall and later became a registered nurse. His father, Carmen, was a physician who delivered over 6,000 babies. He later co-patented a forceps instrument to assist in breech birth deliveries. Lou had 8 other siblings, but only 5 lived until adulthood. He was baptized in the Vatican, and his parents returned to the New York City area shortly thereafter, aboard the RMS Majestic. The family settled in the Mount Vernon area. Lou attended Archbishop Stepanek High School in White Plains, New York, where he competed in track and field and football, where he was team captain. It was this position that later inspired his wrestling gimmick, Captain Lou Albano. He was so talented that he received 32 offers of full scholarships from universities around the country. He chose the University of Tennessee based on the strength of their football team. His team included the likes of Darius McCord and Doug Atkins. But his college career was cut short when, after several conflicts with the dean for poor behavior, he was caught cheating on an exam, which resulted in him being expelled. Now that football was no longer a viable option in Lou's life, he joined the army, but because of a childhood injury, he was discharged after only 8 months. Lou's father, Carmen, wanted to open up an insurance agency and have Lou run it, but not wanting to give up on his dreams of becoming a professional athlete, Lou decided to begin training as a boxer. But standing at only 5'10", other boxers towered over him. Before another door slammed in his face, he met boxing promoter Willie Gilzenberg, future Worldwide Wrestling Federation president, who suggested Lou might want to try his luck in pro wrestling. In the early 1950s, Lou began working for the WWF. Antonio Rocca was Albano's first TV opponent. Lou tried to lay out some spots for himself, but promoter Jack Pfeiffer made it sternly clear that Albano was not to get in any offense. Lou told his friends he was going to work on TV, and they all assumed he would be making as much as $1,000 for being a TV star. Lou ended up being paid $25. He cried foul and ended up being blackballed by Vince Sr. for 6 months because he complained. After expenses, he came away with $13 for the day. Lou got some work in Canada during the winter, but the weather was brutal. After a forgettable run as a singles wrestler, Vince Sr. suggested Lou go to Chicago for a chance to expand his career. It was there he formed the Sicilians with Tony Altimore.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, these dudes I've got up here with me now are known as the Sicilians. And who's the spokesman?
We know we have the ability to beat these guys, and we just want the chance to prove it. We're out here for one purpose, to beat these guys and to bring the title back to Sicily where it belongs.
Do you think that you're in the same league with a couple of champions?
There's nobody in our league. What do you mean the same league? What's the matter with you?
What are you talking about?
What league? We are the greatest tag team in the country today, in the world.
Tell me first of all, who did you beat?
We're beating some of the top contenders in the country.
Names are immaterial, but we beat
Name
them all.
everybody and we beat them.
They had a mob gimmick of 2 stereotypical mob goons, but had to tone down some of their gimmick. Not only were they hated by the fans, real members of the mob were upset at being represented in a negative light. Despite the fact that they were holding the Midwest tag titles, the threat was taken seriously, and afraid for their well-being, they hightailed it back to the Northeast without even dropping the belts. The Sicilians had a good run when they returned to the WWF, even briefly capturing the United States tag titles. Bob Orton Jr. recalled an incident where Lou went to the ring with a gun and saved his dad, Bob Orton Sr., who was a heel, from unruly fans. He would state, "That night in particular, Dad dropped 2 straight falls and still had so much heat that when he left, some guy was standing up in the bleachers and hit him in the head with a chair, which knocked Dad out. And Lou Albano went out with a gun and a couple of guys. Dad's knees were scraped to the bone where they had dragged him out of there. But if Lou wouldn't have went out there with a gun and made people back off, they might have killed him. From that night on, he never got that deep, serious heat because he knew it was too dangerous." In 1962, Lou's father had a head-on collision when a car in the oncoming traffic swerved into his lane, and Dr. Carmen Albano was killed instantly. In 1963, Lou and Altamore appeared on the Jackie Gleason Scene magazine show as Sandpiper Sam Staccato and Altamore as referee Harry Hornet. Even back in those days, Lou believed crossing over into mainstream would serve him and the business well. This basic equation would repeat itself throughout Lou's career.
What mob is running the city today? Our mob. Our mob. This mob is running the city today. Yes, sir. Yes.
Later in the 1960s, Bruno Sammartino told Lou that he wasn't a good wrestler, but liked Lou's talking and suggested he become a manager. Sammartino recalled, "One day I said to Vince Sr., this guy Lou Albano isn't the best wrestler. As a team they can only go so far, but he'd be a great mouthpiece for some guy. Lou had such a gift of gab that he can help out some people. As a wrestler, he just seemed limited. He was always the same. He was never looked upon by promoters as someone who could be anything special. But as a manager, he shined. That was his calling." Lou, realizing that wrestlers only had a limited lifespan in the ring and still dealing with his old football injury, agreed. Although it was his decision to split up his 10-year tag team partnership with Altamore, the two remained very close friends until his death in 2003. By 1969, the Sicilians had dissolved the team, and Albano dubbed himself Captain Lou. His character was that of an Italian thug. He wore silk shirts, fur coats, and big watches. The manager role was a perfect fit for pro wrestling's territorial area. Bruno Sammartino was a WWF mainstay, but his heel opponents were often brought in from other territories on short-term contracts, and once the angle was over, they would fade away, usually leaving for another territory, keeping the angles fresh. Lou became Bruno's longtime rival and hardly ever had to set foot in the ring. Under Lou's management, Ivan Koloff defeated Bruno for the heavyweight title, but Koloff's title reign was a transitional one, lasting just 3 weeks. The shock of Koloff's victory was such that the crowd fell totally silent, and Bruno even momentarily feared that he had lost his hearing. Koloff and Lou were quickly rushed out of the ring by security without the championship belt as the crowd began to riot. Lou, his wife, and a family friend, who were both in attendance, escaped to a taxi outside the garden. The mob surrounded the cab and began breaking windows, so the trio ran to a nearby bar, followed by the crowd who were pelting them with mud and objects. The mob was beginning to destroy the bar as the police finally arrived. Vince McMahon received a bill for damages totaling $27,000, cementing Lou's unapparelled ability to arouse anger from the audience. Koloff would lose the title a short time after to Pedro Morales. That was the first and only time Lou ever managed a heavyweight champion, who would go on to manage both Greg the Hammer Valentine and Don Morocco when they were Intercontinental Champions, and would also manage an astounding 17 Tag Team Champions. Around this time, managers were relatively rare in the pro wrestling world. WWF only had 2 others. However, a promising new wrestler, Oscar Crusher Verdú, had just recently immigrated from Spain. His in-ring capabilities were hampered by a limited command of English, and Lou was assigned to be his mouthpiece. Lou emphasized Verdú's physique and insisted that he had never been taken off his feet during a match. To rile up audiences, he also engaged in ethnic slurs, which were then more of a common part of the WWF banter. Lou promised that Verdú would stomp on that Italian, referring to Sammartino. The fact that Lou was also Italian himself only heightened the audience's reaction. Bruno later said, "They wanted to see me beat the hell out of Verdú to make Albano a liar. He could get the kind of heat that nobody else could." The result was a Madison Square Garden sellout when Verdú faced Sammartino in June 1970, the first for the company in 5 years, and then record gate for a wrestling event in that arena. The record only lasted a month when a rematch brought in over $85,000 in ticket receipts. After losing that match, Verdú cycled out of the WWF rotation, but Lou remained as a top heel manager for the next 15 years. Even as a heel, some would say especially as a heel, Lou was a ball of charisma. Long frazzled mane, Hawaiian shirts unbuttoned, rubber bands tying off his unkempt goatee, and more dangling rubber bands and even safety pins from his face. Underneath, he still had the streetwise, thuggish personality he portrayed in his singles wrestling run, but had honed his microphone skills to make him one of the true greats of his era. He looked like your average tough uncle who could actually throw his weight around, but yet hid behind his proteges. Another protege of Lou was Iron Mike McCord. A memorable match in 1974 featured Chief Jay Strongbow applying his famous sleeper hold on Mike McCord, but Lou interfered in the match by smashing an arm cast over Strongbow's forehead, causing him to bleed badly. It was previously alleged by Albano that Strongbow had since jumped him in the locker room, breaking Lou's arm in the process. But during the match, McCord was disqualified because of outside interference. Strongbow was cut open by Lou's bloody blows. Later, Strongbow settled the score by challenging him to put on the wrestling tights once again, and the stage was set in front of a sold-out crowd at Madison Square Garden, where he defeated Captain Lou Albano quite convincingly. In the early 1980s, Lou wrestled a handful of both singles and tag team matches, teaming with the Moondogs, Fuji and Saito, and even Ray Stevens. In 1984, Lou met pop singer Cyndi Lauper on a plane flight from Puerto Rico. Her manager David Wolf suggested that the two collaborate on a project at some point in the future. He appeared in several of her music videos and played her dad in the music video for the single Girls Just Want to Have Fun. She appeared on Roddy Piper's Piper's Pit program to discuss the collaboration. Lou, in character, began degrading Lauper and women in general and claimed to have written all of her songs and been the only reason for her success. Lauper in turn assaulted Albano with her purse, and the two agreed to settle their differences in the ring. Albano and Lauper agreed to compete by proxy, each choosing a female wrestler to contend. Lauper would choose Wendy Richter, while Albano chose a fabulous Moolah. The match, scheduled for July 23, 1984, was dubbed the Brawl to End It All, and would be broadcast live on MTV. During the match, Lauper interfered on Richter's behalf by hitting Moolah in the head with her purse dubbed the Loaded Purse of Doom. At the conclusion of the match, Richter had defeated Moolah for the WWF Women's Championship, which the WWF had promoted Moolah as having held for the previous 28 years.
You recognize this lovely melody? Well, I don't either. And furthermore, I don't care. The only thing I care about is NRBQ. Round the records. NRBQ Tiddlywinks, baby.
For a time in the 1980s, Lou also managed the rock group NRBQ. The group recorded a 1986 album, Lou and the Q, which contained a song titled Captain Lou, on which Albano himself sings and rants. In the meantime, Lou had become involved in several charities. His brother's brother-in-law had recently died of multiple sclerosis, and the experience led Lou to lend his time to raising awareness and funds to combat the disease, occasionally alongside Lauper.
Millions everywhere, and the students against multiple sclerosis.
Cindy, we're gonna smash it, we're gonna kick it, we're gonna knock it off the face of the earth.
We're gonna do more than that, Lou. We're gonna bust their mess. Bust their mess. Bust their mess.
His increasingly public benevolence clashed with his in-ring persona, which violated the principles of kayfabe, maintaining the appearance of reality within professional wrestling, which was still strictly adhered to at the time. In 1984, Lou decided it was time, after 32 years as a heel, to turn face. He therefore arranged for Lauper to receive an in-ring award for contributions to both wrestling and the fight against MS, for which he also came out and congratulated her. In the course of the ceremony, Roddy Piper came into the ring to sarcastically praise Albano before breaking Lauper's award, a gold record plaque, over his head. Lauper and her boyfriend manager David Wolf were also attacked by Piper and Orton. The melee was broken up by Hulk Hogan, but the altercation allowed for Lou to now wrestle and manage as a crowd favorite. His last two heel proteges, Valentine and Ken Patera, were paired with Jimmy Hart and Bobby Heenan respectively after Albano's face turn. Although he continued his overblown rambling interviews, one of the lead announcers for the WWF, Gorilla Monsoon, continued to refer to Albano as the fountain of misfortune. Lou was now leading fan favorites such as the U.S. Express, George Steele, the British Bulldogs, Hulk Hogan, and Andre the Giant into battle. The U.S. Express and the British Bulldogs became the first tag teams to win the WWF Tag Team Championships with Lou as the face manager. The year 1985 saw the debut of the cartoon Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, which included Hulk Hogan and his band of fan favorites, including Captain Lou, and Roddy Piper's team of bad guy all-stars. Sold to children on Saturday mornings, wrestlers were injected into the mainstream. Their portrayals were borderline inauthentic, and the wrestlers didn't even voice their on-screen characters. This was followed in short order by wrestlers on talk shows, award shows. It was the ultimate victory for the rock and wrestling movement, and in the middle of it all was Captain Lou Albano, now sporting tight t-shirts with his own image. Behind the scenes, he was the WWF's ambassador into the music world. Even though Hogan was appearing on MTV and commercials, Lou was the era's true crossover star. He would highlight it all with appearances on Miami Vice, 227, and in movies like Wise Guys and Body Slam. Lou left the WWF in late 1986 with one final match on an episode of Wrestling Challenge that aired in November, teaming the British Bulldogs to defeat the Dream Team and luscious Johnny Valiant. Lou would then make a one-time appearance on a Piper's Pit episode of Superstars of Wrestling in February 1987 to ask Andre the Giant to reconsider his recent alignment with Bobby Heenan. Lou briefly worked in Herb Abrams' UWF promotion where he hosted an interview segment. Later that year, Lou took a step back from the wrestling business and portrayed and brought to life a video game icon when he played Mario in the Super Mario Bros. Super Show and also was the voice of Mario during the cartoon. He admitted he almost turned down the role when they told him he had to shave off his trademark goatee until he saw how much money they were going to pay him. The show featured both Mario and Luigi, who were running a plumbing company from a basement in Brooklyn. After 65 episodes, Lou returned to the WWF, managing the Head Shrinkers, a team very similar to the Wild Samoans he managed in the early 80s. He took the Head Shrinkers to the tag team titles in a very short time. He left in early 1995, making sporadic appearances as a guest from then on, but never again as a manager. In 2008, on his 75th birthday, at a bar in Queens, New York, ECW original The Sandman gave a drunken toast to his longtime friend, then got into a brawl with the owner of the bar. The rumble made the New York papers and went viral on the internet. Lou once again was in the mainstream. He led pop culture into pro wrestling and pro wrestling into pop culture. He was an ambassador for the crossover success which redefined wrestling into sports entertainment. The events leading up to Lou Albano's face turn proved to be pivotal in the history of the WWF. Hogan, Piper, and Orton began a feud at Lauper's award ceremony that culminated the war to settle the score. The outcome of the war, Hogan winning by disqualification, was the precursor for the primary match at the first WrestleMania, in which Albano also participated as a face manager. More importantly, the involvement of Lauper, a celebrity completely unrelated to wrestling, in the pro wrestling world was unprecedented. MTV's decision to broadcast a brawl to end it all tremendously increased the WWF's public profile, especially to the young adult demographic. Although older wrestling fans saw this change as a travesty, and to the late 80s wrestling fan, it might seem insignificant. Pro wrestling and its stars have been a part of every aspect of pop culture. Love it or hate it, Captain Lou was a trailblazer. If you take Albano's participation out of the equation, there's a good chance the McMahon expansion would have hit an iceberg and died in early 1985. The attention garnered by the Rock and Wrestling connection, stemming from that chance meeting on an airplane between Lauper and Albano less than 2 years earlier, led NBC to make the decision to air Saturday night's main event several times per year in the Saturday Night Live time slot. In 1953, Lou married his high school sweetheart, Geraldine Tango. The marriage lasted 56 years until his death. They had 4 children. Lou had been noted by several others for his faithfulness to his wife, a rare characteristic in the on-road world of 1970s and 1980s professional wrestling. Lou released his autobiography, Often Imitated, Never Duplicated, on July 20th, 2008 through his website. The book includes a foreword by Cyndi Lauper. Lou passed away on October 14, 2009, of a heart attack while residing in hospice care. He was 76 years old. His final role was as Frankie the Hat in the movie Hot Ice No One Is Safe, which came out in 2010. That was the untold story of Captain Lou Albano. Ashley Mazzaro's time in the WWE may not have lasted very long, but she made a huge impact during her time while she was there. From 2005 to 2008, she was one of the most popular female performers and at the height of her career even competed at WrestleMania 23 for the Diva Women's title in a Lumberjill match against Melina. 8 years after departing from the company, Ashley made headlines for far different reasons. As she testified under oath, she had been assaulted while working for the company. She claimed she was told not to go public with her story. She said she suffered from severe depression, and less than 3 years after making these allegations, Ashley was found unresponsive in her Long Island, New York home by her 18-year-old daughter. Later, she would be pronounced dead just 10 days before her 40th birthday. She left behind many questions unanswered. Before her death, she was working as a radio DJ for Long Island station WWSK-FM 94.3 The Shark, and was set to appear in a suicide prevention video, as well as had a trip booked to Las Vegas with former diva Rochelle Lowen, who was already in Vegas waiting for her and texting her asking where she was, but it was too late. This is the story of Ashley Massaro. Ashley Marie Massaro was born in New York City on May 26, 1979. She graduated in 1997 from John Glenn High School in Elwood, New York, and received a BS in Communication with a minor in Business from the State University of New York in Albany. Ashley competed in Miss Hawaiian Tropic pageants and was crowned Miss Hawaiian Tropic USA in 2002 and Miss Hawaiian Tropic Canada in August 2004. Ashley tried out for Playboy Scouts when they were searching for models for the 50th anniversary Playmate Hunt. She appeared in the pictorial in the December 2003 edition. In addition, she appeared on both Fatal Femmes and Flex magazines. Ashley also hosted several E! Channel Wild On episodes and appeared on Breaking Bonaducci as Danny Bonaducci's personal trainer. Ashley guest starred in an episode of Extreme Makeover Home Edition along with WWE wrestlers John Cena and Batista. In addition, she appeared in campaign ads for both Hawaiian Tropic and Yamaha. Ashley met a WWE talent scout at an event and was encouraged to audition for the 2005 WWE Diva Search, which she won to earn a one-year $250,000 contract with the company. Ashley made her debut in WWE after winning the WWE Diva Search in 2005. She was first incorporated into the Raw brand, where she had her first wrestling feud against Vince's Devils. Ashley was later drafted to the SmackDown brand and became the valet for the WWE Tag Team Champions Paul London and Brian Kendrick. Her most high-profile matches was the WWE Women's Championship match against Melina at WrestleMania 23 and as well at WrestleMania 24. In February 2007, Ashley and Glenn Jacobs filmed an episode of Smallville that aired on March 22nd of that same year. During her tenure with the company, she had appeared on the covers of several magazines, including the April 2007 issue of Playboy, and also made appearances on television and in music videos. In April 2007, Ashley also appeared as a guest on Fuse's TV show The Sauce, and later that month, her and other female wrestlers filmed Timbaland's video Throw It On Me, featuring the Hives. Ashley was a contestant on CBC's Survivor China in 2007. She approached the WWE with the idea of doing the show, and after going through the casting process, she found out she made the show 10 days before she had to leave for China to film. Prior to the experience, Ashley had never been camping before, so to train for the show, she had to get used to being out in nature. She was assigned to the Zanhu tribe in the first episode and quickly began quarreling with fellow contestant Dave Cruiser. In the second episode, Ashley was voted off after 6 days with a 6-1 vote. In 2008, she appeared in Rev Theory's video for Hell Yeah. Ashley was released from her WWE contract on July 9, 2008. A week prior to her release, she announced that she had asked to be let go from her contract due to her daughter being sick. In 2016, Ashley Massaro was amongst 60 former wrestlers that filed a class action lawsuit with the Kairos law offices known as the WWE Concussion lawsuit. The lawsuit called for neurologist testing, neurological care for all former WWE wrestlers. It also accused the company of failing to sufficiently protect their employees against the long-term health repercussions of CTE, employment misclassification, wrongful death, and concealment of the risk of head injuries. The lawsuit stated the WWE engaged in systematic misclassification of wrestlers as independent contractors, resulting in the deprivation of their rights under federal law. Many are now disabled with occupational injuries that include the effects of repeated head trauma, resulting in the increased risk of long-term neurological diseases. It also added, WWE brazenly maintains that the named plaintiff wrestlers are independent on any regulation because they are falsely said to be fully independent, like house painters, cleaners, and subcontractors who happen to set foot in a WWE ring. This lawsuit is their only means of getting redress for this structural situation that has deprived them of the rights enjoyed by all workers in the United States. The lawsuit seeks to have the courts in their equitable power to fashion a comprehensive remedy for the working conditions and injuries wrestlers have endured. The lawsuit was later dismissed, and Ashley, in an email to the WWE, stated she regretted taking part in the lawsuit and apologized. After her death, her lawyer Konstantin Kairos said he was unaware of any such email, and that even if she sent it, it's a legal nullity. In September 2017, Ashley made a brief return to professional wrestling by competing in 01 Professional Wrestling USA with former WWE diva Jillian Hall. In a November 2017 affidavit, Ashley explained the hardship she faced with WWE in full grim detail. Aside from my ongoing physical injuries that were sustained in the ring and my former battle with addiction, to this day I suffer from depression, for which I take medication, migraine headaches, and severe short-term memory loss. I have been receiving medical treatment for these problems since I left WWE, in which I'm currently still undergoing. I attribute these issues to my work-related injuries sustained while working for the WWE, and specifically to the routine, repetitive blows to the head I received in the ring over the course of my career, which were not properly diagnosed or treated, despite WWE's admittance that they had and have a duty to take all reasonable steps to protect the health and safety of its performers and to inform its performers of the risk of long-term impairments from repetitive brain trauma. They owed me this duty during and after my wrestling career, and they failed to live up to its obligation. As a result, it has caused me severe and ongoing pain and suffering, emotional distress, and financial hardship. Ashley continued, I received a letter from Paul Levesque, Triple H, dated November 7, 2014 regarding the WWE Former Talent Drug and Alcohol Rehabilitation Assistance Program. The letter, which I still have, states that help would be provided to participants regardless of the reason for their departure from the WWE or amount of time performed in the WWE. It seems contradictory that WWE acknowledges the duty to assist former talent with drug and alcohol treatment, but does not acknowledge any responsibility for the treatment of the head injuries that led to the addictions. In her 15-page affidavit, Ashley also explained the injuries and abuse she suffered while with WWE. I've had multiple documented concussions during my career. Aside from the times I was knocked unconscious and out cold for 5 minutes, I also have a fractured spine, a 5-inch metal plate inserted in my ankle, and debilitating back injuries. Vince McMahon himself ordered a cast to be sawed off my right hand moments before I was thrown back into the ring to wrestle on TV, even though the cast was not scheduled to come off for another 2 or 3 weeks. I was beat down, broken, and being almost forced to perform. Since then, I see pain management doctors on a monthly basis for 10 years because of the pain and problems that came from the time being there. I've been plagued by these injuries my entire life after leaving the company. I believe WWE has caused major life-altering problems and wish more than anything that I would never have worked for them. After winning the 2000 in a spokesmodel capacity, not as a wrestler. Nonetheless, WWE classified her as an independent contractor rather than an employee. Inconsistent with her status as a spokesmodel, WWE required Ashley to perform 4 or 5 days a week as a wrestler, only 1 week after winning the competition and without any training under her belt. Almost immediately, the injuries began piling up. This led to pain medication dependence and addiction, something she claimed contributed to her plunge into deep depression. WWE even tried to take 20% of her cut from the $250,000 Diva Search winnings. The explanation given to Ashley by WWE was that someone named Rich from Marina del Rey, California, had represented her in the deal. When she refused and denied this information, WWE threatened to take away her contract. During her second week with the company, Ashley asked Stephanie McMahon if she could receive wrestling training at WWE's Ohio Wrestling School in Louisville, Kentucky. Stephanie said no, stating that Ashley would be off TV and lose her fan base and spot on the roster if she were to do this. Ashley's popularity almost guaranteed her exposure, but didn't allow her to be in the spotlight to get proper wrestling training. Within a month of being with WWE, Ashley Massaro had a match with a veteran female wrestler at a house show who performed a backbreaker on her. Ashley's back was slammed directly onto the unnamed performer's knee, leading to a severe back injury. Ashley had expected to be taken aside before the match to be shown how to adequately protect herself during the move, but this never happened, despite, as she claimed, everyone knowing that she didn't have proper in-ring training. She also asserted that other wrestlers worked stiff with her because she was new. With Ashley's lack of training came multiple concussions. Ashley remembered a match that took place on September 5th, 2005. Again, Ashley was knocked unconscious for 5 minutes because nobody taught her how to be on the receiving end of the move safely. The only person who advised her afterward was Trish Stratus, who told her to shake it off because she knew that wrestlers often got into trouble when they spoke up. After being refused permission to train on her 2 days off each week, Ashley disobeyed and did so anyway. She feared that if she continued to accumulate injuries, become permanently disabled, or even die without learning proper techniques on how to protect herself. When Stephanie McMahon found out about her training, she stopped it immediately, stating that she didn't know anything about the gym Ashley was training at and that it could become a liability for WWE if she got injured. Ashley learned years later that she was within her rights to continue training on her days off, but at the time she wasn't aware of her rights as an independent contractor. She believed that she might have prevented at least some of the injuries she had suffered, like a hairline fracture to her spine, the numerous back injuries, and herniated discs. An injury that haunts me to this day on February 20th, 2006 was when I was injured in the ring at a women's battle royal. I suffered a large fracture that went around my leg bone twice, and a piece of the bone became loose. Ashley continued, on February 22nd, 2006, I underwent surgery to have a 5-inch metal plate, 8 screws, and staples placed in my leg. Despite the serious injury, WWE forced Ashley to get into the ring. During a spot that went wrong, Mickie James kidnapped her, causing Ashley to fall out of a chair. Trish Stratus then accidentally landed on Ashley's already severely injured leg. As a result, Ashley required further surgeries, including an operation to fix her ankle in 2010. In the summer of 2006, Ashley shattered her knuckle against Crystal Marshall. With her hand placed in a cast, it was to remain there for about 4 weeks. But soon Vince McMahon ordered it to be taken off weeks before properly healing so that she could perform in a match. She was acting as Brian Kendrick and Paul London's manager at the time, and according to her affidavit, Paul London was a witness to the incident. In 2007, on a visit to Kuwait during a 2-week tour in support of the troops that included stops in Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia, Ashley experienced an unspeakable ordeal that affected her mind, body, and soul. She was drugged violently by someone professing to be a U.S. Army doctor. I can't even find the words to describe what it felt like to be thrown on a table, stripped, and then brutalized in the worst possible way that one human being is capable of brutalizing another, all while being unable to move or speak. In addition to the pain and terror, I felt almost dehumanized. According to her affidavit, she began to suffer from cramps and wanted to take some time to rest in an air-conditioned Humvee. However, some of the U.S. Army soldiers insisted that she was suffering from dehydration, a common occurrence in the dry, hot climate. So they transported her to a nearby military base in Kuwait, where she would receive an IV for dehydration, despite her insisting she did not need it. Ashley detailed the terrible ordeal that followed. After sitting with the IV in my arm for what felt like hours, Jimmy Hart came in to check up on me and make sure I was okay. I told him I was fine, but that they wouldn't let me leave because they said I had to wait to see a doctor. Jimmy said he and the rest of the group were going to lunch and left. Another couple hours went by, and then a man appeared in the sick bay, dressed in an orange t-shirt and cargo shorts, and I heard others comment that it was his birthday. He represented himself as a U.S. Army doctor, but I observed that all the other doctors in the facility had been wearing scrubs, so I do not know whether or not this was true. He was with a woman who was dressed in full military fatigues. While I was in the sick bay, he approached me and almost immediately administered an IV of an unknown substance into my other arm. Almost immediately after, the alleged doctor and the woman in fatigues moved me into a room that did not appear to be a treatment room and placed me on a table. The woman guarded the door while the man proceeded to inject me with a drug that caused me to be unable to move my body or to scream. The man proceeded to violently me. I was completely helpless to defend myself against this attack, as the drugs he injected rendered me temporarily paralyzed. Despite being unable to control my movements, I remained fully conscious for every second of the attack. I felt excruciating pain as a result of this man me by force and against my will, in a violent and aggressive manner while I was completely defenseless. Each second that went by was excruciating, and I have never felt more helpless or been more terrified in my entire life. This experience was a living nightmare. I don't know exactly how long this went on for, but it felt like an eternity. The suffering I endured far surpassed all the injuries I have ever suffered in the ring put together. I was experiencing not only severe physical pain, but severe emotional and psychological trauma. Although Ashley herself didn't want the information of this appalling attack to become public, once back in the United States, Vince McMahon led a meeting with her, including other WWE executives. McMahon said that it wasn't in WWE's best interest to make the details of her attack public and should be kept confidential. He did apologize for what happened, but told her not to let one bad experience ruin the excellent work the military was doing. He didn't want to tarnish WWE's relationship with them. To ensure that this wouldn't happen again, WWE instituted a new policy where a female escort would accompany any female performer who went to the Middle East 24/7. But with the damage done, nobody in the WWE even suggested therapy. Ashley was forced to deal with the incident herself. Sadly, and to be expected, she relived it countless times in her mind. "I am angry that WWE silences its performers," Ashley would later say in an affidavit. "I'm angry that the WWE puts its performers in dangerous situations. I'm angry that the WWE fails to provide appropriate treatment when injuries occur. I am angry that I'm already suffering from long-term effects of in-ring injuries, which may get worse over time, and WWE disclaims responsibility. The pattern of behavior illustrates a lack of concern on their part for the health, safety, and well-being of its performers." Ashley continued, "I finally broke my silence because I thought my story would help shed light on what I view as an important cause that has deeply affected me and so many others. WWE has utterly failed in its duties to promote and protect the safety of well-being of the men and women who dedicate their lives to the business, and it should not be permitted to continue to sweep important issues under the rug. Finally, I hope that telling my story may cause a young person aspiring to be a professional wrestler to think twice and consider the realities of the situation and not make the same mistakes that I did." On June 30th, 2018, Ashley began working as a radio DJ for Long Island station WWSK-FM 94.3 The Shark, where she worked 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturdays. The following May, she was promoted to hosting the station's evening program on Wednesday nights. Ashley was always thankful of her fans and regularly kept in touch with them on social media as well through fan mail. On May 15th, 2019, Ashley finished replying to fan mail but failed to show up for work at WWSK-FM later that evening. At 5:23 a.m. the following morning, paramedics responded to a rescue call where Ashley was discovered hanging and unresponsive at her home in Smithtown, New York. She was pronounced dead upon arriving to the hospital 10 days before her 40th birthday. On the evening of Wednesday, May 15th, Ashley was making plans for the future. She was texting her friend and fellow former wrestler Rochelle Lowen about an October autograph signing in Alberta, Canada, but first there was a more pressing matter, a spontaneous jaunt the very next day. "Do you want to go to Vegas? I'm going down tomorrow through Sunday," Lowen texted Ashley, who had been planning her own trip to Nevada for the following week. "Come stay in my room with me and my girlfriends at the Hard Rock." "That sounds great. I'll hit you back after I check with my airline." Ashley texted at around 5:30 p.m. that evening. On Thursday morning, Lowen landed in Las Vegas and texted Ashley. "I said, 'Are you coming, babe?' Lowen told the Post, and I didn't hear back. Instead, Lowen's phones buzzed with a text from another friend. 'Did you hear about Ashley?' She would later post on her Instagram page, 'I'm shocked and devastated by Ashley Massaro's passing. She was supposed to be here in Vegas on this girls' trip which I'm on right now. We spoke yesterday. She said she was coming. Now she's gone. I'm at a loss. I don't know how to process this quite yet. I miss you, Ashley. I miss you already, babe. We spoke no longer than 24 hours ago." Visitation for Ashley was held that day and the next at the Branch Funeral Home in Smithtown. On May 21st, she was buried at the St. James Church Cemetery in St. James, New York. At the time of her death, some news outlets, all citing the website TMZ, stated that Ashley's death was a suicide. The medical examiner's office did not release an official cause of death, citing a New York state privacy law that allows withholding information that would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. In September 2021, a USA Today article stated that she had died by suicide and wrote that her death, along with the suicides of wrestler Hana Kimura and Daphne in the succeeding 2 years, had spurred a conversation about mental health in the professional wrestling industry. Ashley had taken part in a suicide prevention music video by her WWSK co-worker Brian Orlando, who had recorded a song with Brandon B. Brown, Vinny Dombrowski, and Kevin Martin. Following her death, Orlando scrapped plans to release the video. With her family's blessing, it was released in July 2020. In response to the affidavit made public, WWE would respond. WWE is saddened by the death of Ashley Massaro, and we reiterate our condolences to her family. However, we regret that her attorney Konstantin Kairos, who filed multiple cases against WWE, lost them all, and was sanctioned multiple times by the court for repeated misconduct and false allegations, is using Ashley's death to further his malicious campaign against WWE by releasing an affidavit that she submitted to the court and later apologized to WWE for being involved with. So we wish to make certain things crystal clear. At no time was Vince McMahon or the management of WWE ever informed by Ashley Massaro or anybody else that she had ever been assaulted, drugged by a military doctor with a nurse standing guard while on a goodwill tour in 2007 to the U.S. military base in Kuwait. In fact, if she ever articulated such a claim to WWE, we would have reported it immediately to the base commander. At no time was there ever a meeting with Vince McMahon, Kevin Dunn, John Laurinaitis, or other company executives in which she told them of such a claim and was instructed to keep quiet. In a moving tribute on his Facebook page entitled Goodbye Ashley, Mick Foley wrote the following. Ashley Massaro was only 39 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. We lived in the same small town in Long Island. Her daughter and my 2 children went to the same elementary school together. Ashley and I often talked about getting the children together for activities, but it never happened. I was always sure there would be another time, plenty of time to get the children together. Ashley loved her daughter so much and hoped that through wrestling she could make a better life for her. I'm looking at this photo as I am typing and my heart is just breaking. She was so beautiful and so kind-hearted. I wish so much that I had followed through with our plans to get our kids together. She was always so nice to me and everyone in my family, and now she's gone. In the aftermath of her tragic death, Trish Stratus and Lillian Garcia were determined to help Ashley's family and daughter, so they put together a video where several WWE divas spoke directly to her. Following the news of her death, Rebby Sky made a controversial post on Twitter. The tweet received a lot of backlash from fans. Rebby then responded the following. Death threats against me and my kids because I'm tweeting over a TV show and not in a black veil? I can't. She would later tweet, people desperately trying to force me to care about something I don't give a fuck about and looking for shit that ain't there. I'm out here tweeting about a drag race, but I'm fat and ugly cause I ain't mourning. Lol. This led to Ashley's daughter, Alexa Massaro, tweeting the following. No one wants you to care. You could have worded this way better. Who are you to even say something like this? Who involved you? This is an incredibly distasteful way to clear up an obvious misunderstanding. Fortunately, Ashley's family wasn't in need of funeral costs, but Mick Foley convinced them to agree to a fundraiser for a college fund for Ashley's daughter Alexa. It was a way of helping out that also involved the fans. Mick Foley even promised to watch SmackDown or Raw with fans who donated $5,000. For $10,000 he'd fly overseas. $17,000 was raised in the first 24 hours, and thanks to her fans' generous support, over $100,000 was raised in total. It was a classy move by all involved and truly showed how much Ashley Massaro meant to her fans and loved ones. On November 21, 2020, Ashley's younger brother, Ronnie Massaro, was fatally stabbed in New York City at the age of 39. He was buried in the same cemetery as his sister. For every John Cena or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson that professional wrestling produces, there are countless others chewed up by the back-breaking industry. There have been several suicides and drug overdoses, and a handful of former pros that have been diagnosed with CTE after death. While the action in the ring is choreographed, that doesn't mean the body contact isn't physically punishing or that things don't go wrong. That was the story of Ashley Massaro.
I don't wanna feel this good just 'cause you called last night. I'm not that girl. I don't wanna dress up for you and be a toy. I'm not that girl. No, I'm not that girl.
This is a Brooklyn Brawler, and you're watching another original wrestling documentary.
It was the early 2000s, as peer-to-peer file-sharing application Napster rocked the foundation of the music industry, eventually losing a wave of lawsuits and filing for bankruptcy. Dr. Dre headlined the Up in Smoke tour, which featured Ice Cube, Eminem, Snoop Dogg, among others, and made stops in 44 cities and grossed over $22 million. Tech giant AOL purchased Warner Brothers for a reported $182 billion in one of the biggest media mergers in U.S. history. And professional wrestling had just gone through a massive shakeup. The then World Wrestling Federation had just bought its two biggest rivals in World Championship Wrestling and Extreme Championship Wrestling the year prior, effectively monopolizing the televised professional wrestling business. If you wanted to see the top guys or any wrestling on cable, it was WWF or bust. Two camps would form in the wake of the consolidation of the top three. Two camps that would become, for a while, the number 2 and number 3 promotions in the United States. Wrestling was never hotter. From music to movies to cartoons, sports entertainment injected its influence into every area of pop culture. As the popularity of the pastime grew, so did the popularity of the internet, and the number of homes that had internet access rose, and a new phenomenon was born: online predators. And with reality TV on the cusp of producing some of the greatest digital content ever, a new sensation was born: NBC's To Catch a Predator. Anchored by a borderline vigilante group, Perverted Justice. In 2004, all these entities would be thrown into a blender and brewed into a fruity fusion, which would be poured over the life of Rob Feinstein and leave him denying allegations for years to come. This is the story of Ring of Honor Wrestling and its controversial owner, Rob Feinstein.
And remember this man? We originally thought his name was Timothy, another local man looking for a young girl. But he turned out to be this man, Robert Feinstein, a Langhorne businessman who promotes wrestling events. He has his own website with plenty of pictures of himself. We tried to catch up with him at his office and his home, but each time he saw us, he ran. And according to his chat log, he thought he was meeting a 14-year-old boy.
The tale of Rob Feinstein is an unusual, often conflicting one. The video company which he founded, RF Video, was based on blatant and serial copyright infringement of digital material from around the globe, yet Feinstein has always been consumed with safekeeping his own content and material. The very people he had the greatest contempt for, internet wrestling fans and message board posters, are the same people who he had marketed all of his products to. With the collapse of ECW in April of 2001, Rob Feinstein and his video company RF Video were in trouble. RF Video had been distributing ECW's content on home video for some time, and the promotion had been RF's biggest seller. The company relied on a deal with ECW that allowed them to not only tape most of their live events, but also allowed them to sell their products to hundreds, if not thousands of fans that would be in attendance to those events in any given weekend. Now that it was all gone, RF Video needed something to keep business booming. Knowing ECW's general audience, wrestling fans who had a preference in more violent hardcore wrestling, Feinstein first attempted to make a deal with the fairly new Combat Zone Wrestling, which had been the second most popular hardcore promotion in the United States. CZW at the time was a regional promotion that had a few video distribution deals, including one with RF Video. Attempts were made to substitute ECW with a variety of independent groups, with upstart promotion Combat Zone Wrestling being the most successful. The relationship with CZW saw RF Video book and pay, out of their own pocket, several ECW wrestlers in an effort to appeal to the customers they were losing as a result of ECW closing. During this same period, CCW had made a deal with a small video company, Smart Mark Video, to tape and distribute their live events. As both video companies each taped and sold their own versions of CCW events, attempts were made by RF Video to buy into the company. CCW's owner, John Zandig, wasn't interested, likely because the Smart Mark Video deal was more beneficial. While RF Video would pay a flat fee to tape and sell an event, Smart Mark Video would set up profit-sharing deals with organizations, allowing for more financial gains. Most organizations simply didn't trust Feinstein enough to do similar deals with him. Feinstein decided the next best strategy was to start his own promotion, Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor made its debut in the wrestling world on February 23, 2002, with an event in ECW's home city, Philadelphia. Called The Era of Honor Begins. Ring of Honor's first card featured quite a few popular names from the independent scene, Christopher Daniels and the late Jay Briscoe, to name a few of the most popular, but also featured a big name in Eddie Guerrero, who at the time was not involved with the World Wrestling Federation. While the financials of Ring of Honor at the time were speculated to be a bust, the first Ring of Honor event and the company itself seems to have been a success as the events continued to go on. The company expanded to have events across the East Coast, aligned itself with Florida-based indie promotion Full Impact Pro, and by 2003 had even held an event in England with Frontier Wrestling Alliance promotion. Part of this can be attributed to a few deals Feinstein made in late 2002 and early 2003. The biggest deal perhaps was the alliance with wrestling magazine publisher and former Belushi Coke dealer Kerry Silkin, who agreed to financially back Ring of Honor. Another major acquisition was Booker Gabe Sapolsky, who had previously been an assistant to ECW head Paul Heyman. Sapolsky had joined RF Video in late 2001 and developed what became the Honor Code, the inverse of the hardcore nature of ECW. Whereas anything went in ECW, Ring of Honor had a system of handshakes before matches, and the hardcore stuff was saved for personal feuds. It was an unusual system for the business, but it worked in establishing heels by simply not following the code. On top of those deals, Ring of Honor also worked out deals both nationally and internationally. One of those deals was with the other wrestling promotion launched around the same time as Ring of Honor, Total Nonstop Action, allowing Ring of Honor to use TNA's talent, which at the time included AJ Styles, Homicide, and Amazing Red. The other was with All Japan Pro Wrestling, which in turn allowed their personnel, such as the legendary Great Muta, to appear at the 2003 Final Battle event. Ring of Honor appeared to be on an unstoppable train on the rails to success. They seemed to have everything in place: financial backing, a strong roster consisting of many wrestlers from all around the world, and a very successful video market. What could possibly go wrong? The name Perverted Justice may sound familiar to some. They're best known for their work on the Dateline segment To Catch a Predator. Unfortunately, Perverted Justice also plays a role in the history of Ring of Honor. Sometime before To Catch a Predator, Perverted Justice teamed up with the NBC affiliate WCAU to host their own Predator Sting. Slam Wrestling Net would report, a noted wrestling personality in Philadelphia, Feinstein, was allegedly the target of a media sting focusing on adults who cruise internet chat rooms attempting to contact underage individuals for sexual encounters. NBC 10, WCAU TV, a network affiliate in Philadelphia, and PervertedJustice.com joined together on the group media bust. NBC 10 rented a decoy house while Perverted Justice worked the chat rooms as underage individuals. Adults who expressed interest in meeting the minors for sex were then directed to the house where the NBC 10 film crew was waiting to catch them on camera. Perverted Justice claims that a contributor, J Alternative, contacted the site asking for information on Ring of Honor due to an individual messaging him on a Philadelphia AOL chat room who represented himself as a wrestler. The conversations J Alternative had with the wrestler ID'd as RF Wrestling lasted 2 days and included 2 phone calls. J Alternative portrayed himself as a 14-year-old boy. NBC 10 aired a story showing a man who identified himself as Rob Feinstein arriving at the setup house and then leaving the scene once a camera crew and reporter confronted him. NBC 10 claims to have made the identification based on video analysis and the license plate number on the car. NBC 10 did return Slam Wrestling's calls but would only verify how they identified Feinstein. At this time, no charges have been filed against Feinstein. And indeed, there were chat logs. We won't go into depth about the logs, but here is an example of the messages exchanged. How old are you? 23. Yeah, but that's older than me, and you can drive and drink, and I'm 14. And no one ever wants to see me because they say I'm jailbait. But I can't meet guys my age because they might tell guys at school. Damn, 14. See? I'll pretend you said 18. I look 18, I can buy smokes. You're so adorable. Damn, you're a little like 40 minutes from me. Or we could chill. And Rob Feinstein indeed tried to chill, and got busted. In the news clip, there was no doubt it was Rob. He had linked photos of himself from the promotion's website and clarified he was in the business. Ring of Honor, at the time of the bust, a critical success but not a financial one. Feinstein's stature in wrestling, though, had improved and had grown from the low point of the 90s, where his antics on internet message boards and the overall quality of his product had turned much of the wrestling community against him. On the day he walked up the steps leading to the bust house, he was the owner of arguably the second or third largest wrestling organization in the United States, and with the help of financial backer Kerry Silkin, things could only go up from there. Things were going good for him, but that would all change the moment the door opened and he found himself on the other side of the camera lens. The news broke out rather quickly, and word spread rapidly. Fans and wrestling personalities began to distance themselves from Feinstein, and within 24 hours, he announced his departure from his executive positions in both Ring of Honor and RF Video. Perverted Justice would post on their website. Philadelphia news affiliate NBC 10 and ourselves at pervertedjustice.com recently came together to set up a group media bust in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A group media bust is an agreement where a media outlet rents a house or apartment, gives our site the information, and we work chat rooms as underage individuals, sending overage individuals to the house to meet the cameras and be exposed for their acts. At roughly 10 p.m. on February 29th, Perverted Justice contributor J Alternative messaged the owner of PervertedJustice.com inquiring for information on wrestling due to an individual messaging him online who represented himself as a wrestler. What followed is a story that is amazing, even to ourselves at Perverted Justice. Ring of Honor owner Rob Feinstein had messaged J Alternative in a Philadelphia AOL chat room and responded favorably to the idea of meeting a 14-year-old boy for immoral purposes. The conversation spanned 2 days and 2 phone calls. Both individuals who had contact with Rob Feinstein while pretending to be a 14-year-old boy named Brandon are not wrestling fans. They know very little about wrestling, and they had no clue who Rob Feinstein was until he came across our volunteers. Rob Feinstein was not targeted by our organization. Instead, he ended up targeting one of our contributors and is now paying for that decision. Rob Feinstein showed up at our group media bus door to meet NBC Philadelphia reporter Harry Harrison on the day he initiated the conversation with Brandon. This occurred on March 1st. Feinstein ran to his silver Lexus and peeled off from the scene of the meeting. This was all captured on camera. Even Ring of Honor talent had comments about it, such as future WWE star Samoa Joe. Rob, please do not allow yourself to ever enter my site. My anger for you and your actions far surpass anyone or anything imaginable. Your heinous, terrible acts are beyond excuse and explanation. Your shame is yours alone and forced upon us by your arrogance and lies. Though others formerly close to you are holding their tongue and focusing their efforts on salvaging what your sick, selfish, and stupid actions have caused, I have the luxury of telling you that I hope you get exactly what you deserve. My gut instinct tells me I hope you are found one morning without breath, but in reality, as a decent human being, unlike you, I hope you find some help for your sickness. TNA also pulled out of their deal with Ring of Honor, depriving them of crossover talent, some of whom had championships or were booked to become champions in Ring of Honor. Despite this being March, however, Rob didn't leave the company for another 3 months. Though suspicions that he remained involved were high, despite the insistence of those involved with the companies. Feinstein himself was telling people that he was still owner and that he was just laying low and they were waiting for things to blow over, which just added to the confusion. The general feeling among wrestlers was that he was still involved, but they weren't sure. Confirmation that he was still involved came in June when Ring of Honor finally severed its ties with Feinstein and RF Video after he was bought out of his Ring of Honor ownership, his share of the promotion eventually winding up in the hands of Kerry Silkin. RF Video would remain his, though by the time the company had little value without the Ring of Honor library and with all the negative attention it had received. Back to where he started when ECW fell apart. Rob Feinstein had to figure out a way to make money. On top of this, he had disgraced himself by being caught trying to prey on a minor. Regardless, he hadn't been arrested or convicted, and eventually in 2014 wrote a now deleted statement, which thankfully had been preserved by wrestling journalists, where he would make the following claims. Nobody knows the internal fighting that was going on and how Kerry wanted to start his own RF Video by filming indie shows and doing shoot interviews. Nobody knows how I was going to fire a few key staff members before that day in March of 2004. A month before the incident, I had a major power play with Kerry once again at the ROH show in Baltimore, Maryland, where Kerry asked for majority ownership of ROH, or again he threatened that he would not pay any of the talent that night and he would also stop funding the company. Keep in mind, they wanted me out of ROH before that day in March. I never did anything wrong or illegal, and I was set up. There are more personal facts that I will not get into. There were other motives to get me out of the company. To make a long story short, Rob believed it was a setup to get him out of the company so that Kerry could take charge that, even in Rob's words, involved perverted justice. On top of that, he would also state, I also never hid my personal life from my friends. I never did anything wrong in the past. I did indeed meet someone who I talked to. I met them in an adult chat room. I saw pictures of this person as they had sent me their pictures. The person was not a kid, but a college person. I had talked to the person on the phone, and it was clear as day it was an adult. The chat you claim you read is not real. Anyone can add anything that they want to text. The infamous LOL, I'll pretend you said 18 line, is not mine. I never said half of the conversation that they claim I did. The bottom line is that I was 100% set up, and I never once talked about having sex or anything to that nature. For years, Feinstein had alternated between claiming innocence and pretending like the NBC 10 incident never happened. Rob also threatened to sue the NBC affiliate and Perverted Justice. Throughout the years, Perverted Justice had its own controversies. Parts of chat logs missing, accusations of entrapment, overly aggressive decoys, and several times charges against predators had been stayed due to the organization not submitting their hard drives as evidence as legally required. Luckily for Rob, he soon found another market to keep his video company afloat: shoot interviews from wrestlers who did not care about Rob's past. And when it comes to shoot interviews, RF Video gets a lot of notable names in what is apparently solid content. On top of this, wrestlers to this day talk about Feinstein's behavior, such as Joey Janela saying Feinstein hit on him when Janela was 17. RF could have been Tony Khan if he played his cards right. Spoiler, he didn't. RF knew the tremendous wealth of talent on the indie scene at the time. At one point, his roster consisted of Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, Low Ki, AJ Styles, and Christopher Daniels, and none of these guys were even the champ. If he hadn't done what he did, I would imagine pay-per-view was a goal, and his tape selling could have funded a major launch. Instead, he hawks his merchandise wherever he can and tries to swindle whoever possible. As a famous WWE Hall of Famer once said, everybody's got a price.
Hey, it's not the same. If I close my eyes, maybe I'll feel you again. Hey, relight the flame.
Tiny Lister was an actor and part-time professional wrestler also known as Zeus and later Z Gangsta. His on-screen feud with Hulk Hogan starting in the No Holds Barred movie and boiled over into a main event match at SummerSlam 1989, where he teamed up with Randy Macho Man Savage and faced Hulk Hogan along with his partner Brutus Beefcake. Despite being blind in one eye, in 1982 he was NCAA 2 Division Shot Put champion and also played multiple exhibition games in the short-lived United States Football League, but decided to pursue a career in acting instead, which spanned over 4 decades and accumulated more than 200 acting credits. Despite his massive size and intimidating appearance, he was known to be humble and down-to-earth and a devoted Christian. One of the few actors who crossed over into the world of professional wrestling who didn't leave a bad taste in the mouth of loyal fans. This is the untold story of Tiny Lister, aka Zeus. Born Tommy Lister in Compton, California on June 24, 1958, the second of 4 children, and later became known as Tiny due to his massive physique, standing 6'5" and weighing over 300 pounds. He was born with a deformed detached retina in his right eye, causing permanent blindness. Tiny grew up in Compton, California, which at the time was filled with drugs, gangs, and violence, but he chose to break the curse of his generation at an early age. He stayed away from gang life, choosing instead to stay home and watch westerns. He chose religion over wrongdoing. He also developed an interest in films and television early in life. His grandmother Rosie Lister was Lucille Ball's maid for over a decade. Tiny attended school at Enterprise Junior High School and later Compton High School, where he began competing in track and field, which was his first love, where he became a standout in shot put. Early in his life he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which he stated almost made his parents bankrupt in order to keep him on a proper diet. In 1977, Tiny had a minor car accident when he drove his vehicle through the front wall of an unoccupied apartment and stopped in the living room. And in 1982, while attending Long Beach City College, he became a Division II undefeated champion, breaking the school record 7 times in 1 year with a mark of over 61 feet 8 inches, a record that still stands today. After college, he trimmed down to 275 pounds, and despite never playing a game of football in his life, he tried out for the LA Rams and San Francisco 49ers, and ended up playing 2 exhibition games for the USFL team, the New Orleans Breakers, and at the time was bench pressing 500 pounds. After being cut, he was called back a few weeks later, but he was already getting into acting and declined the offer. His first role was Blue City with Walter Hill, which he considered a mentor, and went on to work on several movies together. In 1984, after being cast for the TV series First and 10, he requested to be written off the show after deciding he could no longer work on the same set as O.J. Simpson, claiming during an interview on the Hannibal TV that O.J. was the worst human being he had ever met in his life, even long before being accused of double murder in 1994. He also became close personal friends with John Candy as well as Michael Jackson, while recruited to work on the Remember the Time video, which was filmed over a 5-week period on a Hollywood backlot and directed by John Singleton. In 1989, he auditioned for the role of Zeus in No Holds Barred starring Hulk Hogan. Before going into the audition, he had already had the letter Z shaved into the side of his head and already had his boots made as well. Admittingly not knowing much about professional wrestling, he saw a huge opportunity. According to Tiny, at the time of his audition, he had just over $300 in his bank account, and Vince McMahon, while negotiating, directly deposited $75,000, making it impossible for Tiny to refuse the part. Vince McMahon would have Tiny appear at SummerSlam in order to promote the movie. During the filming, Hulk Hogan accidentally broke Tiny's nose during a fight scene, which they would use as the beginning of a storyline feud between the two, who actually became good friends in real life. Tiny began touring with the WWF and appearing at house shows, and even turned down carrying the world title at the advice of his agent, who was also Hulk Hogan's agent. His debut was on Wrestling Challenge, which aired on May 14, 1989, when he came up before a match and chased 2 enhancement talents out of the ring, as well as ring announcer Mike McGurk. This was not something that was originally planned when the No Holds Barred movie was filmed. Because of this, the shoulder pads that Tiny wore to the ring began to fall apart, as they were initially just made for the movie filming and not to be used past that. Because Tiny always entered the ring over the top rope, Andre the Giant did not like him, and he was also rumored to have heat with a lot of the other talent in the dressing room because of his fast rise to main event status, and he even received death threats. He appeared on the May 27, 1989 edition of Saturday Night's Main Event before Hogan's WWF World Heavyweight Championship title defense against the Big Boss Man in a steel cage. Boss Man's manager Slick introduced him. Zeus blocked Hogan from entering the cage and kicked him in the chest and hit him with a few double axe handles. Hulk Hogan laid on the ground while Zeus walked slowly back to the dressing room, and they cut to a commercial. On that same month, he would also do several interviews, including one at a live show with Mean Gene Okerlund, and also appeared on the Brother Love Show. On the July 29th edition of Saturday Night's Main Event, Zeus would accompany Randy Macho Man Savage to the ring and stand in his corner along with sensational Sherry Martel while he faced Brutus the Barber Beefcake. When Beefcake put his finishing move, the sleeper on the Macho Man, Zeus interfered and Savage was disqualified. While Zeus had Beefcake in a bear hug, Hogan came to his rescue. Zeus would no-sell every move and shot that Hogan dished out, including a chair shot would only make Zeus smile. In SummerSlam of that same year, he would team with the Macho Man and face Hogan and Beefcake in the main event. He would continue in the WWF doing a series of interview segments with the Macho Man entitled The Moments of Serenity with Randy Savage and Zeus, who is now sporting a unibrow. That same year, Tiny, along with Sherry Martel, would appear on the Arsenio Hall show, while in the Zeus character ended the interview by chasing Arsenio and his band off the set, who is known to be a huge wrestling fan. In Survivor Series 1989, he would team with Ted DiBiase, the Barbarian and the Warlord against Axe, Smash, Hulk Hogan, and Jake Roberts, only to be disqualified after choking Hogan and shoving the referee. In 1989, the World Wrestling Federation scheduled a pay-per-view titled No Holds Barred, the match, the movie, to be held on December 27th of that same year. The program consisted of the film No Holds Barred in its entirety, followed by a match previously recorded at a Wrestling Challenge taping on December 12th at the Nashville Municipal Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee. The main event was set aside in a steel cage which pitted Hulk Hogan and Zeus on opposing teams. Hogan teamed with Beefcake, while the heel Zeus teamed with Randy Savage. Although there were initial plans to have Zeus and Hogan face off at WrestleMania 6 and have Hulk drop the belt, those plans were scrapped and they went with Hulk vs. Warrior instead. This was Zeus's last match in the WWF as he left shortly afterwards. Randy Savage continued to target Hulk Hogan over the WWF Championship. On July 7, 1990, Zeus fought Abdullah the Butcher in a double countout at a World Wrestling Council show in Puerto Rico. For his own safety, he had 2 armed police officers with him at all times during his trip to Puerto Rico, mainly due to the Bruiser Brody incident which left Tiny uneasy about working in the territory. In his interview with Rosenberg in 2014, he admitted wrestling was the biggest rush he had in his life. In 1991, Pro Wrestling Illustrated ranked him number 500 of the top 500 single wrestlers in the PWI 500. He also appeared as Cletus in the 1992 film Trespass starring Ice-T and Ice Cube, originally named Looters, but the original title was scrapped due to the Rodney King verdict and actual looters rioting in Los Angeles at the time. In 1994, he turned down the part of Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction. He later became a staple in Ice Cube's Friday movies as a neighborhood bully known as Debo, which he stated was inspired by Big U, a reputed kingpin of one of Los Angeles' most notorious Crip factions. In the movie, Debo would ride around the neighborhood on a squeaky bike that was heard from miles away, which drew fear from every character in the film. Ironically, in 1965, at the age of 7, a young Tom Lister would win a free bike during a promotion from Bob's Family Restaurant. The nickname Debo would follow him for the rest of his life, which he embraced and even made several appearances as Debo for both charity and church events. He would make a return to the world of professional wrestling in 1996 in WCW, resuming his on-screen feud with Hulk Hogan, this time known as Z Gangsta. He debuted on the May 18, 1996 edition of Monday Night Nitro after being contacted by Hulk Hogan as part of the Alliance to End Hulkamania, culminating in a failure at Uncensored. He debuted with actor-wrestler Robert Swenson, who was billed as the Ultimate Solution, managed by Jimmy Hart. They would face Macho Man and Hogan in a 3-tier cage match with members of the Dungeon of Doom on one side and members of the Four Horsemen on the other. Sadly, Swenson would pass away of a heart attack shortly after at the age of 40 years old. Hulk Hogan, Davey Boy Smith, and James Caan gave eulogies at his funeral. In 2014, at the Orlando Urban Film Festival, he won Best Star Spotlight for his performance in No Weapon Formed Against Us. In 2016, he was nominated for the Best Bad Mother Award at the All Deaf Movie Awards. In 2019, he briefly revived his role as Debo along with Chris Tucker during a church service in West Los Angeles, where he robbed Tucker for his chain on stage during his testimony. Later that year, he would also take to Instagram and announce he had started his own clothing line. In January of 2020, Tiny legally changed his name to Tiny Debo Lister, paying homage to his Friday character. Later that year, during an interview, he stated that a new Friday movie was already written but yet to be filmed. According to Ice Cube, the script had been delivered to New Line Cinema, but producers Tony Emmerich and Richard Brenner showed no interest in another Friday installment. In April of 2020, Tiny teamed up with the Pineapple Express, a cannabis delivery company, to deliver their product personally to 4 winners. He would make the deliveries at precisely 4:20 as Debo, to the surprise of the customers. He was a fan of both The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and even after making hundreds of movies and working with top stars, he would still quote Bible verses during interviews instead of bragging about his own accomplishments. The athletic department of Lister's alma mater, Cal State, LA, sponsors an annual track meet in his name. Although Tiny never engaged in any gang activity, because he came from a Crip neighborhood, during his WWF tenure he refused to ride in a red car. Tiny was diagnosed with COVID-19 around August 2020 and overcame the illness. He became ill with symptoms similar to COVID-19 a second time in early December, showing weakness and trouble breathing, which forced him to cancel shooting for a film. His manager, Cindy McGowan, who said it was not normal for him to miss filmings, became concerned and sent her assistant to his house to give him vitamins and antibiotics. On December 10th, police were called to check on Tiny and found him dead in his home in Marina del Rey, California. He was 62 years old. The coroner's office investigated his cause of death, which originally was suspected to be from complications of COVID-19. However, the final autopsy report revealed that the cause of death was hypertensive and cardiovascular disease. Tiny's condition in the days before his demise was alarming, but he was confident he'd be taken care of by the man upstairs. During a live streaming Q&A with fans, he was noticeably not well as he struggled to speak at times and even nodded off, but continued on due to his dedication to his fans. Sources say his condition was much more noticeable in person. Condolences poured in from everyone from Ice Cube to Kid Ink to AEW Wrestling. And although playing a bully in several roles, he was known as the opposite in real life, very humble and grateful. That was the untold story of Tiny Lister, aka Zeus. Hana Kimura was a professional wrestler from Japan. She was associated with prominent organizations in her country, including World Wonder Ring Stardom and Wrestle One. She possessed unmatched charisma within the Stardom promotion and was one of the 2 female wrestlers the company had envisioned building its future around. Additionally, she showcased her talent internationally by participating in events organized by companies such as Ring of Honor, Pro Wrestling Eve, and various independent promotions in Mexico. Being a second-generation wrestler, Hana Kimura's mother, Kayoko Kimura, also had a successful career in professional wrestling. Beyond her wrestling career, she gained recognition as a member of the cast in the reality television series Terrace House, Tokyo, co-produced by Fuji Television and Netflix. Tragically, Hana Kimura faced severe cyberbullying from viewers of Terrace House, which led to her posting distressing messages on social media. On May 23, 2020, Hana Kimura was discovered deceased in her Tokyo apartment. Many questions still remain, but what can't be questioned is the impact Kimura left on the industry during her short career. This is the story of Hana Kimura.
Passing through. If heaven's not my home, then hell will have to do.
Hana Kimura was born on September 3, 1997 in Yokohama, Japan. Her mother Kayoko gave birth to her when she was just 20 years old. Kayoko chose Hana's name because she believed it was easy to say and thought her daughter would be adored for her name. However, after 3 months after Hana's birth, Kayoko became a single mother, taking on the responsibility of raising Hana all by herself. Her interest in the entertainment industry began at a young age. She grew up in a family with strong connections to the world of professional wrestling. Her mother, Hana Kimura, was also a professional wrestler, and her father, although he left when Hana was just a baby, is a former professional wrestler and promoter. Hana's upbringing in this environment undoubtedly influenced her career choice. From a young age, Hana displayed a lively personality and would often dance in front of Kayoko's friends during gatherings. She was also fussed over and would receive lots of attention due to her vibrant nature. However, Hana faced challenges as well. Her father was from Indonesia, and when she started attending elementary school, some of the other children bullied her, taunting her with racist remarks. Despite experiencing these hurtful comments, Hana persevered and continued going to school, although there were days when she would come home in tears. During her time in junior high school, Hana developed a keen interest in dancing, modeling, and aspiring to become a star. Kayoko wholeheartedly supported her daughter's dreams and was fully committed to helping her pursue the things that she wanted to do. During her high school years, Hana Kimura began to develop a passion for professional wrestling. Originally aspiring to be an action movie star, her ambitions gradually shifted towards the world of pro wrestling. At the age of 18, she made her debut in the wrestling ring, embarking on a path that would shape her future. Kayoko observed her daughter's journey into the wrestling world with a mix of pride and relief. She believed that Hana had found her true calling and felt a sense of comfort seeing her daughter wholeheartedly dedicate herself to this newfound passion. Kayoko recognized that Hana's vibrant personality and innate qualities made her particularly well suited for the world of professional wrestling. But before even faintly dreaming about becoming a professional wrestler, at only 8 years old, Kimura achieved a notable feat by capturing the DDT Ironman Heavy Metalweight Championship on August 21, 2005, during a thrilling live event in Tokyo. However, her reign was cut short as she ultimately relinquished the title to her own mother, Kayoko. Prior to her professional wrestling debut, Hana appeared on several reality television shows in Japan. In 2016, she participated in the reality show Terrace House, which followed the lives of 6 young adults living together in a shared house. Her time on the show brought her significant attention and popularity both in Japan and internationally. Following her reality TV stint, she decided to pursue a career in professional wrestling. She joined the wrestling promotion Stardom, one of the premier women's wrestling organizations in Japan, known for its emphasis on athleticism and storytelling. Kimura dedicated herself to honing her skills at the esteemed Professional Wrestling University under the guidance of Wrestle One.
The angels beckon me from each dark and eerie door, and I can feel at home in this world anymore.
After successfully graduating from the prestigious Wrestle One Training Academy, Kimura marked her promotional debut on March 30th, 2016, engaging in a captivating match against her fellow classmate, Reika Sayaki. Unfortunately, she faced defeat on this occasion. Throughout the year 2016, Kimura and Sayaki clashed multiple times in Wrestle One, showcasing their developing skills and chemistry in the ring. A significant moment arrived on August 7, 2016, when Kimura confronted her own mother in a highly anticipated match. Later, on September 18th, Kimura achieved a remarkable milestone by capturing her first championship title, the JWP Junior Championship, prevailing over Yako Fujigasaki in a thrilling tournament final. However, her reign was cut short on December 28, 2016, when she lost the championship. January 22, 2017 was a bittersweet day as it marked her mother's retirement. In Kayoko's farewell event, Kimura emerged victorious in a singles match against her mother, showcasing her ongoing improvements. Furthermore, the duo would then join forces and triumphed in a trios match during the same event. During the year 2017, Hana exhibited her versatility by dividing her time among Wrestle One, Sendai Girls Pro Wrestling, and Stardom while maintaining her status as a contracted performer for Wrestle One. Subsequently, on January 9, 2018, she officially became a member of the Wrestle One roster. Gaining more name recognition, Kimura embarked on an international tour in early 2018, showcasing her skills in prominent promotions such as Ring of Honor,
Pro Wrestling Eve, and various Mexican promotions. However, on March 21st, 2019, Hana made the difficult decision to part ways with Wrestle One, announcing her departure from the promotion. In September 2016, Hana expanded her presence by joining World Wonder Ring Stardom. Making a significant impact, she formed a formidable trio alongside her mother and Kagetsu, and together they clinched the prestigious Artist of Stardom Championship on October 2nd, 2016. Unfortunately, due to Hana's injury, the team had to relinquish the titles on January 3rd, 2017. However, Hana's journey continued as she became a proud member of Stardom's villainous stable known as Oedo Tai. A major triumph came on June 22, 2017, during Stardom's Galaxy Stars 2017 event, as Hana and her fellow Oedo Tai comrade, Kagetsu, captured the Goddess of Stardom Championship by defeating the formidable Team Jungle. Displaying their dominance, they held their titles for an impressive duration, successfully defending off formidable teams such as Jungle Kiona and HZK, Lo Shirai and Viper, and HZK and Momo Watanabe. Hana made her presence felt in a dark match at Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling's G1 Supercard on April the 6th. Alongside Stella Gray and Sumi Sakai, she faced Jenny Rose and the Oedo Tai duo of Kagetsu and Hazuki. Notably, Hana was appointed as the leader of the International Army faction. The faction was subsequently renamed Tokyo Cyber Squad on April the 21st. Continuing her success, Hana, alongside her stablemates, captured the Artist of Stardom Championship. Hana's journey took her to new heights as she participated in a historic dart match at New Japan Pro Wrestling's Wrestle Kingdom 14 on January 4th, 2020. Alongside Julia, she faced Maya Iwatani and Arisa Hoshiki, marking the first women's match at the Tokyo Dome since 2002. Hana's final match occurred on March 24th at Stardom's Cinderella Tournament 2020, where she wrestled Mayu Iwatani in the first round, resulting in a draw. Throughout her illustrious Stardom career, Kimura attained remarkable accomplishments and emerged victorious in the 2019 5-Star GP tournament. Additionally, she was bestowed with the prestigious Stardom Fighting Spirit Award, solidifying her status as a revered competitor.
These chains, they hold me down. They finally took their toll. I can't find the strength to fight like this no more.
Kimura became a cast member on the reality television series Terrace House in September 2019, remaining on the show until her untimely passing. Tragically, an episode filmed in early January 2020 depicted a verbal conflict between Kimura and her housemate Kai Edward Kobayashi regarding damage to her wrestling attire. When the episode aired in March 2020, Hana faced severe backlash, including criticism, name-calling, and racist abuse from individuals on social media. The wave of negativity took a toll on her mental health, plunging her into depression. In the early hours of May 23, 2020, Hana shared distressing self-harm images on Twitter and Instagram, accompanied by some of the hate comments she had received. Tragically, later that same day, she was reported deceased at the young age of 22. 3 days following her passing, Dave Meltzer stated that the cause of death was likely hydrogen sulfide inhalation. In December 2020, her death was officially ruled as a suicide. In December of 2020, police announced the arrest of a man in his mid-20s for engaging in cyberbullying. The individual, residing in Osaka, admitted to the allegations, expressing to the police that he couldn't forgive Kimura's attitude on the program. On March 30th, 2021, the Tokyo Prosecutor's Office indicted the man for online abuse directed towards Hana. However, due to the nature of the offense being relatively minor, he was not obliged to face trial and instead received a fine of 9,000 yen, which equated to around $80 US. This sparked concerns about leniency of the punishment. In response, Kyoko Kimura, the late wrestler's mother, filed a lawsuit seeking damages exceeding $20,000 from the man. Subsequently, on April 5, 2021, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police charged a second man in his late 30s for the online abuse he directed towards Hana. During voluntary questioning, the individual, hailing from Fukai, admitted to the allegations, stating many hateful messages had been posted and I followed suit. I'm sorry. When asked about his motivation, he explained that he simply joined with the behavior he observed from others on her social media platforms. In the wake of Kimura's death, the release of new Terrace House episodes was halted as a response to the devastating event. Subsequently, Fuji TV made the decision to cancel the entire season, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. Prior to her passing, Hana had been slated to co-star alongside Ina Fujita in the music video for the musician's single Dead Stroke that was set to be released in June of 2020. Additionally, a music video titled Till the Break of Dawn by Lalo the Dawn, which Kimura had recorded before the COVID-19 pandemic, was uploaded on YouTube on May 20th, 2021. As mentioned earlier, Hana was a second-generation wrestler. Sadly, at a very young age, Hana experienced separation from her father. Kyoko Kimura has shared in interviews that he is of Indonesian nationality. As a result, Hana was often described as Indonesian Japanese. Regrettably, her mixed ethnic background made her a target of bullying during her childhood. On January 22, 2021, Kyoko Kimura filed another lawsuit with the Tokyo District Court, seeking damages of approximately 2.9 million yen, which equates to about $27,000 US, against a third man for causing emotional distress to her family. The lawsuit stated that the individual from Nagano had posted hateful messages regarding Hana's death in May 2020. On May 19, 2021, the Japanese court ordered the third man to pay 1.29 million yen, which is about $12,000 US, in damages as a result of his actions. Following the tragic passing of Hana, numerous professional wrestling companies, including New Japan Pro Wrestling, National Wrestling Alliance, Ring of Honor, All Elite Wrestling, and Impact Wrestling, among others, expressed their condolences on the day of her death. AEW's Double or Nothing pay-per-view event featured a whole tribute to both Hana and Chad Gaspard, who tragically passed away that same week. During the May 27th episode of WWE NXT, Lo Shirai and commentator Mauro Ranallo paid homage to Hana with heartfelt words. Lo expressed, "Hana was one of the most talented female wrestlers in the world, and I was looking forward to watching her grow and see how far she could go. I will always remember her smile that would brighten up any room she walked into. It is so important that we all love and treat each other with respect." Sasha Banks wore a black armband with Hana in white letters as a tribute during the May 29th episode of WWE SmackDown. Dakota Kai dyed her hair pink as a tribute to Hana during NXT TakeOver In Your House. On June 21st, World Wonder Ring Stardom held its first event during the COVID-19 pandemic, and before the event, a 10-bell salute was conducted as a tribute to Hana, with all the wrestlers gathered around the ringside area. Pepe, Hana's former castmate on Terrace House, immortalized her in the third volume of his manga series Mingo, which was released on July 10th. During the September 3rd episode of AEW Dynamite, Kenny Omega wore a Hana Kimura shirt on what would have been her 23rd birthday. The shirt was made available on Pro Wrestling Tees, with all proceeds going to Hana's mother Kyoko. On June 14, 2022, the Japanese Parliament passed a law making online insults punishable by up to 1 year in prison. This legislation was a result to the online bullying that Hana faced. Kyoko Kimura established the non-profit organization Remember Hana on March 31, 2021, with a focus on combating bullying. In honor of Hana's memory, the Hana Kimura Memorial event series was inaugurated on May 23, 2021, and the second anniversary occurred on May 23, 2022. That was the story of Hana Kimura. Lutte Internationale, also known as International Wrestling, was a promotion based in Montreal that operated from 1980 until 1987. Not to be confused with the 1961 French documentary titled La Lutte, filmed and produced in Montreal. It was considered one of the big three promotions in Canada, along with Calgary Stampede and Maple Leaf Wrestling. The promotion was founded by Frank Valois, Andre the Giant, and Gino Brito, as Promotions Varusak, a combination of all three owners' names. Lutte Internationale succeeded Grand Prix Wrestling, which closed in 1975 and left the city without a major promotion. Capitalizing on the void left, Gino Brito, Andre the Giant, and Andre's manager Frank Valois, the promotion took off. Importing stars from the US to face off with local talent proved to be a winning combination. French-born Andre the Giant considered Montreal his second home, and he had several businesses which operated in the area and was well known. Their first major show was held on August 25, 1980 at the sold-out Paul Soave Center, where Andre the Giant battled Hulk Hogan in the main event. Andre would sell his share in 1984 when he signed full-time to the WWF. Several other individuals would own a piece of the promotion throughout the years, including Dino Bravo, Rick Martel, Tony Mule, Eddie Creechman, and his son Floyd. Many former Grand Prix stars joined the new promotion, including Frenchie Martin, Gilles the Fish Poisson, Len Shelley, Rocky De La Sera, Michel Dubois, Pierre Mad Dog Lefebvre, Serge Dumont, Zeranov Lebu, and the Rougeau brothers. The influx of major stars helped the promotion obtain a television contract with CFC-FDT shortly after its debut. Inevitably, it faced the same fate as every other major promotion in Canada when WWF took over and lured away most of the top talent with lucrative deals, and was considered the end of the golden age. This is the untold story of Lutte Internationale. It was 1891. As the world's first traveler checks are issued by American Express, the first basketball game is played in Springfield, Massachusetts. The Boston Beaneaters finished the year as National League champions. A lynch mob storms the old parish prison in New Orleans and lynches 11 innocent Italians arrested for the murder of police chief David Hennessy. And one of the first organized wrestling cards was held at the Armory in Montreal. John McMahon, the self-proclaimed collar and elbow champion, tussled with W.C. Quinn to a draw in front of a disappointed crowd. The preliminary matches of the card drew more excitement than the main event, which featured Sailor Brown, Professor Stevenson, Charles McDoyle, and Harry Powers. The Montreal Gazette would report match results on a weekly basis, helping the sport gain new followers and keep longtime fans well informed on match results. Through the late 1800s, other stars that would pass through the area would include Yvon the Straggler Lewis, Dan McLeod, Harry Moses Dufour, and the terrible Turk Ismail Yusuf.
Solomon was ruler of the wisest of the nations. He founded that great brotherhood we know as the Freemasons. All Masons are as brothers, rich or poor, they're all akin. Unless a man is tried and true, he cannot enter in. In sickness or in trouble, they are bound to help each other. No matter where a Mason goes, he'll always find a brother.
In 1919, Lucien Riopel won possession of the Jubilee skating rink and was the man behind professional wrestling in Montreal during the late 1920s and into the early part of the 1930s. Sometime in the early 1930s, wrestler Jack Ganson relocated from New York to Montreal and began wrestling in the area. In 1934, disgruntled New York promoter John Hassan Pfeiffer attempted to expose the inner workings of professional wrestling through the media, which left a ripple effect on the business in neighboring Montreal and took a toll on ticket sales. By the mid-1930s, Jack Ganson would officially claim the Montreal territory and began promoting shows in the area, but it was an uphill battle, with ticket sales at an all-time low. Over the course of the entire 1936 season, wrestling took in only about $60,000. The Montreal Gazette, in October of 1937, reported that professional wrestling under the promotion of Jack Ganson had only drawn over $100,000 and more than $71,000 so far that year, with 7 shows remaining. On August 8, 1939, Eddie Quinn arrived from Boston promoter Paul Bowser's office and began to build his own promotional powerhouse with Yvon Robert. He chose to avoid the scientific wrestling favored by Jack Ganson, the previous promoter at the Forum, instead of what he called pink wrestling. Quinn pushed gimmicks, storylines, and bloody brawls. Quinn's shows began with Yvon Robert as his central attraction. Other stars in his promotion included Edouard Carpentier, Yukon Eric, and Killer Kowalski. At one point, Gorgeous George was brought in for a series of matches against Yvon Robert. Another famous match featured boxer Jersey Joe Walcott facing wrestler Buddy Rogers, which Rogers won in the 3rd round. In fact, Quinn tried an early experiment by not only reviving the masked Marvel character, but actually having him win the AWA Montreal title from Vic Christie in a June 9, 1938 match in Toronto. He dropped it a little over 3 months later to Yvon Robert in Montreal. The fan response was encouraging, especially for a rematch. During the 1940s, Quinn and Robert, along with a cast of regulars that included Thez and Bobby Manigoff, drew steadily, increasing houses at the Montreal Forum. Robert even managed to sneak in an NWA World title reign when he defended Wild Bill Longson at the Forum on October 7, 1942. For almost 2 months, Robert was a dual champion, as he also held the Montreal Championship. He dropped the NWA belt to Manigoff November 27th in Houston, Texas, but continued to rule Quebec for the rest of the decade. Wrestling in Quebec really begins with Yvon Robert, who is generally regarded as the greatest superstar the province ever produced. Holding many regional titles over the course of his career, Robert was also a world champion and even headlined numerous cards in Europe. Robert started wrestling in 1932 at the age of 17. He got his first stint in Boston with promoter Paul Bowser's American Wrestling Association. In 1935, he made his National Wrestling Association debut as Yvon the Lion Robert. It was a territory of the National Boxing Association to sanction professional wrestling. He got his first big exposure after attacking world champion Dano O'Mahony during a match. He left the promotion in 1936. In his home province of Quebec, was a true legend on equal footing with hockey's Maurice Rocket Richard. Partnered with promoter Eddie Quinn, it was Robert who spearheaded the incredible popularity of wrestling in Montreal right up to the moment he retired. Beginning in the late 1930s right up to the 1950s, the city, despite claims by other hot territories of the era, really was the mecca of the pro wrestling game. In April 1936, during his time in Montreal, he won the Montreal Heavyweight Championship 16 times between 1936 and 1956. Robert returned to the American Wrestling Association in July of '36, just 2 weeks after his return, defeated O'Mahony to win the AWA World Heavyweight Championship in Montreal, claiming his first world title. He was recognized as the first champion in New England and by the Montreal Athletic Commission. Robert was stripped in December 1937 for not defending against Lou Thez. In 1940, he left the AWA for a second time. In 1940, he also started his second stint with the NWA. On October 7, 1942, he again beat Wild Bill Longson to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in Montreal, Quebec. On November 27th, he lost the title to Bobby Mangahoff in Houston, Texas. In 1943, he left the NWA. Also during 1943, he won the Montreal British Empire Heavyweight Championship. Robert returned to Montreal. In 1948, he wrestled Gorgeous George to a draw before a Montreal record gate of $21,000 and broke that record within a year. In 1953, he formed a successful tag team with Whipper Billy Watson and won the Canadian Tag Team Championship. On November 12th, Watson and Robert defeated Alan Tiny Mills at a wrestling event held in Toronto with boxing champion Joe Louis as a special guest referee. During the 1950s, forum cards were so stacked with top-notch wrestlers from all over the world that it was extremely difficult for promising local workers to break into the upper card. Donning the mask provided an up-and-comer like Dominic DiNucci with a ready-made gimmick and an opportunity to audition against main event talent to see if he could keep up. And if things didn't work out, Quinn just put someone else under the hood to see if the next guy could cut it. Quinn decided to join the 4-year-old National Wrestling Alliance cartel of promoters in 1952. On the surface, it appeared to make sense. Robert was beginning to wind down as Montreal champion, and a new local hero had not yet been lined up. In an attempt to prove he was a team player, Quinn even downgraded the Montreal title from its world status. On October 15th, 1952, a miscued knee drop from the top rope accidentally ripped challenger Yukon Eric's ear off during a title match at the Forum. The incident made headlines throughout North America and turned a budding star into the legendary Killer Kowalski overnight. Although completely unexpected, it was also the type of promotional breakthrough Eddie Quinn himself could scarcely have dreamt of. The ensuing Kowalski-Eric feud was an absolute sensation that drew record crowds in Montreal and in cities all over the continent. Suddenly, neither a local babyface champion nor the NWA World Titleist was required to pack the Forum. Kowalski was now the man and would go on to hold the Montreal title a record 11 times and continue to draw huge gates well into the 1970s. Due in large part to the huge publicity over the Kowalski-Eric incident, live wrestling from the Forum debuted on the French-language Radio-Canada network on Wednesday, January 14, 1953. Eddie Quinn was on top of the world. His TV show was consistently in the top 10 most-watched programs in the province, while his house shows at the Forum were averaging about 10,000 fans on a weekly basis. Business was so good that Quinn even scheduled annual summer outdoor shows at Delormier Downs Baseball Park, home of the famous minor league Montreal Royale team, which regularly drew in excess of 20,000 fans. Quinn was a key player in a series of events in 1957 which deliberately ruptured the undisputed NWA World Championship claim and splintered the alliance for decades to come. That year, Lou Thez seemingly had enough of the NWA cartel of promoters, specifically with Sam Muchnick of St. Louis, who was also NWA president, so plans were formulated for a world title switch. In Montreal, the great Yvon Robert retired and Quinn had finally found a marketable babyface where he made popular Edouard Carpentier as the heir apparent. Since Quinn owned Carpentier's contract and was on good, close terms with Thez, the NWA champ arranged to drop the world title to Edouard in Chicago on June 14th. Carpentier even posted the required $10,000 bond to ensure the belt. In order to clear the way, Edouard had dropped his Montreal title to Gene Kiniski at the Forum 2 days earlier. Quinn seemed poised to be the major player on the North American scene. He would stand to get a cut from Carpentier's title defenses while exerting some measure and direct control over the NWA World Championship. Additionally, he had a second ace in the hole for his own shows. Kowalski, who was still drawing huge houses in Montreal since 1952, was pegged to succeed Carpentier and return as local champion in Montreal. In fact, he defeated Kiniski for the belt that July 17th before 21,000 fans at the Delormier Downs Stadium. For a short time after that, at an NWA meeting, Jack Pfeiffer, a notorious and controversial promoter, was invited, for a reason which remained fuzzy to this day. Word got back to Quinn and he exploded with rage. Apparently Quinn, as well as many others, had some bad blood with Pfeiffer, and Eddie was furious that this man was being allowed back into the sphere of the NWA cartel. As a result, Quinn withdrew Montreal from the National Wrestling Alliance, and Carpentier returned the NWA title belt, resigning the championship. The NWA then had no choice but return the belt to Thez and strike Carpentier's reign from the books. Quinn then fired off a now famous letter to Muchnick, which was leaked to a New York newspaper. He wrote,
"Dear Sam, I would like to explain to you again, if it is possible to get the message through, that for the past 20 years, I have been fighting the cancer of the wrestling business, Jack Pfeiffer. This is the same man that tried to kill the Alliance, and he has loused up quite a few territories of NWA members, including New England, where I have $25,000 investment. You, as president of the Alliance, knows that everybody in it despises Pfeiffer and what he stands for. You, as president of the Alliance, trying to play politics with everybody in it,
must realize that sooner or later you have to face a barrier. At times you are much weaker than others. If you think it is good business for the Alliance to have Jack Pfeiffer consorting and in partnership, or in conclusion, or working with certain members of the said Alliance, I think it is your duty as a man to bring this to the attention of the rest of the members. Remember, the first thing you asked me before the Alliance meeting is what I did think of the Alliance. I told you all that business-wise it was no good, as the government takes care of that. I did express my thoughts that it was a worthwhile social group, but that we should get together more often to become better acquainted on matters pertaining to business. But with you have the bold audacity to inflict Jack Pfeiffer on the members of the Alliance, socially, it is a little too much for me. Yes, I did tell Larry Mo Quinn that I was sick. In fact, I was nauseated by your conduct in allowing our common enemy to mingle with the members, thus causing them much embarrassment. I'm sure when Lou Thez hears about this incident, it will only convince him that he did the right thing when he left you and St. Louis in the meeting behind him. The reason I wish to get out of the St. Louis promotion is firstly the promoter or promoters have shown no ability to promote for the past 2 years. I know you spend your time knocking Thez as a poor businessman and Longson as a dope. Sooner or later you will have to take the blame on your own shoulders. Another thing I did not like at the meeting was when that loudmouth, blatant individual, Cliff Mopin, a garbage collector of the old school, kept knocking Thez about his forthcoming trip. It struck several of us very funny that you did not stand up and defend Lou, who by the sweat of his brow has been paying your salary as long as he has been champion and was making you money when he was your partner in promotion. Getting back to Carpentier, you seem to overlook the fact that Carpentier is my personal property. He does not belong to you or the National Wrestling Alliance. He is not recognized by you or the National Wrestling Alliance. He is not recognized by you, and neither does he claim to be NWA champion. He met and defeated Lou Thez June 14th in Chicago via disqualification. In a return match in Montreal, he met and was defeated by Lou Thez July 24th. You should be able to add 2 and 2. On the next meeting held in Chicago, I understand the match was a draw. I have consulted my attorney on the matter, and they suggested that I write to you and have you return Edouard Carpentier's $10,000. What you are holding it no one seems to know. If this money has not been returned within 10 days from this date, I will have my attorneys turn this matter over to the United States Department of Justice and the St. Louis Police, care of the Bunko Squad. My attorneys seem to think this is a combination of blackmail, extortion, or grand larceny. Hope this will clarify everything. Sincerely yours, Eddie Quinn. The last paragraph signaled a potentially astonishing play by Quinn. An important note to keep in mind here is that the NWA cartel was under investigation by the U.S. Justice Department around this period. If Quinn was aware of this, his threat over the return of Carpentier's deposit was ruthlessly cunning. Since his promotional base was in Canada, any Justice Department probe in the States wouldn't have affected him greatly, and even if he didn't know what the feds were up to, the tone of his letter suggests that he at least anticipated that any cartel would be doomed because of the American antitrust laws outlawing such activities. In any event, it's clear that any such legal threats would have sent shivers up the spine of Muchnick and the NWA board for fear of having their business practices exposed and potentially destroying the kayfabe notion that wrestling matches were legitimate sporting contests. Naturally, Carpentier's deposit was returned, but that wasn't the end of the headaches for the National Wrestling Alliance. In fact, it was only the beginning. Eddie Quinn kept rolling right along following Montreal's exit from the NWA. Eddie Quinn was what many would call a high roller. His spending habits were notorious in Montreal, and he had a reputation for lavishing his friends and acquaintances with endless gifts, cash, and freebies. It is rumored that Quinn once had the largest individual phone bill in Quebec, and there wasn't a nightclub, racetrack, or sporting event that he didn't frequent, both here and in the eastern and southern United States. Needless to say, the loss of television ruined his Canadian athletic promotions company. Crowds at the Forum dwindled terribly, and Quinn had no cash reserves to weather the storm. As a result, his health suffered greatly. The combination of business stress and fast living triggered several strokes, and he finally gave up and closed shop and died on December 14, 1964. He was only 59 years old. In the early 1960s, the torch was unofficially passed from Robert to another local sensation, Johnny Rougeau. Well known as a protege of Robert's, Johnny was a popular junior heavyweight champion in Montreal and won his first international heavyweight title on November 7, 1961 in, of all places, Ottawa by defending the villainous Hans Schmidt, who would be Johnny's bitter rival throughout most of the decade. He lost the belt some 8 months later to Killer Kowalski, but his reputation as a babyface headliner was solidified. In 1961, Filmmaker set out to expose the wrestling business when a random encounter with French philosopher Roland Barthes changed their mind. Barthes was appalled by what they were planning to do and spoke urgently about the beauty and social role of pro wrestling in the lives of ordinary people. Persuaded by Barthes, the filmmaker set out to make a film that captured the spectacle of the sport without judging it, shot in the Montreal Forum as well as wrestling parlors where would-be wrestlers learned and practiced their craft. The film shows the wrestling arena to be sort of a modern-day shrine, with wrestling and its rituals taking the place of religion. La Lutte, also known by its English title Wrestling, was produced by Jacques Bobet for the French program brand of the National Film Board of Canada. It was nominated for multiple awards. Ironically, Johnny Rougeau would leave the wrestling world shortly after that as the business began to suffer a severe decline in Quebec. The situation bottomed out when Carpentier vacated the international title in 1964 for more lucrative paydays elsewhere. The same month, Quinn passed away. In the meantime, Rougeau had become a successful nightclub entrepreneur, but the nightclub circuit in Montreal was waning as well, and with Quinn gone, the position of promoter was now wide open and Johnny made his move. With an initial investment of $50,000 and a solid French-language television deal with CFTM Channel 10, Rougeau formed Eastern Sports Enterprises in 1965 and dubbed his promotion All-Star Wrestling. Rougeau wisely ventured out cautiously and set up his home base in the modest Paul Soave Centre in the East End of Montreal. He then proceeded to recruit an interesting mix of veteran workers such as Antonio Rocca, Larry Quinn, and Tony Angelo to headline over lesser talent and a few imports from other Canadian provinces. The sensible decision was also made to continue the lineage of Quinn's international heavyweight title, tying the new company to Quebec's rich wrestling history. Initially, following the traditional booking path of mixing local names with well-known American veterans, the atmosphere generated by Expo 67 saw Rougeau initiate the angle of Quebec versus the world, which the greatest wrestlers from all around the globe would come and challenge the local superstars. On October 23, 1967, 5 days before Expo closed, the Sheik, billed as hailing from Syria, defeated Gino Brito in a tournament final for the All-Star International title, thus ushering in the new promotional direction. In 1968, Joe LeDuc hit the Quebec wrestling scene with one of the biggest bangs ever seen up until that time. It was just before a climatic 2 out of 3 falls match between Johnny Rougeau and the hated Waldo Von Erich at the Paul Soave Centre that a new tag team was introduced to Montreal fans. Paul and Joe LeDuc, two lumberjack brothers from Godbout, Quebec, received a standing ovation and took their seats at ringside to watch the main event. What followed next could serve as a blueprint on how to draw major heat from a new arrival in a territory. Rougeau and Von Erich split the first 2 falls and were allowed to return to their respective dressing rooms for a 5-minute rest in between. Throughout the bout, the LeDucs made it clear to the fans that they were on local hero Rougeau's side by openly cheering him and even heading to his dressing room during the first break to check on his condition. Then something strange happened. During the break before the third and deciding fall, Paul LeDuc disappeared backstage for a few minutes. When the participants returned to the ring, Von Erich gestured for the LeDucs to come over and talk, but they refused. All seemed well, but 15 minutes into the deciding fall, Waldo tossed Johnny out of the ring, and the LeDucs rose once again to help their fellow Quebecer, or so it seemed. Instead, they removed their jackets and viciously attacked Rougeau, kicking and stomping him. Von Erich joined in and Johnny was soon a bloody mess. The fans in attendance, outraged, began littering the air with chairs and some even stormed the ring. The LeDucs were soon surrounded and couldn't leave until 4 cars of policemen were called in to escort them back to the dressing room. By now, a full-scale riot was in progress, and the Ledukes found themselves trapped in the dressing room. An emergency call for 5 more police cars went out as fans rampaged throughout the arena. Street violence was quite common in Montreal during that era. This was the same year Pierre Trudeau, who would be elected as Prime Minister of Canada the following day, was pelted one night with rocks and bottles as he sat in the dignitary's box to view the annual Saint Jean-Baptiste parade by a gang of radical Quebec separatists. Back inside the Paul Soave Centre, it was pure bedlam, as cars were now being overturned. Main streets around the area were blocked off well into the early hours of the morning. By 4 a.m., a journalist finally managed to smuggle Joe and Paul out of the center in the back of a car. In total, 14 police cars were called and thousands of dollars in damages were incurred. Despite the mayhem outside the ring, those were the glory days for Johnny Rougeau's All-Star Wrestling program. The year of 1968 saw Montreal-born Ivan Koloff become the Russian Bear and engage in a feud with Rougeau, which broke attendance records at the Forum and electrified the province. Rougeau's next creation was an Ontario-born fellow named Larry Shreve, who was soon transformed into the madman from Sudan, Abdullah the Butcher, probably the most successful heel character in Quebec wrestling history. Other stars that would frequent the area included Fritz von Raschke, Danny Lynch, Mr. X, Carlos Roca, Tiger Jeet Singh, Don Serrano, and countless others. Rougeau's popularity as a wrestler, floating in and out of retirement several times, and now as a promoter, soared. His involvement in the Quebec Junior Hockey League furthered his reputation around the province as well. But Johnny's most significant idea was to build his promotion around the Rougeau family name, starting with the recruitment of his brother Jacques Sr., and followed soon after by his son Raymond, billed publicly as his nephew. Johnny implemented this concept well before Stu Hart did in Calgary, or Fritz von Erich did in Dallas. During the latter half of the decade, Johnny Rougeau's All-Star Wrestling Group had the province all to itself. By 1969, the promotion was at the peak of its powers, drawing record crowds to the weekly cards at the Paul Soave Centre, bigger shows at the Montreal Forum, and in cities throughout Quebec. Even though the company was based around local stores like Johnny Rougeau, his brother Jacques, Gino Brito, Edouard Carpentier, Hans Schmidt, and Waldo von Erich, imported superstars like Bruno Sammartino and the Sheik were brought in to great public acclaim. Two of the most successful heels of that period were Abdullah the Butcher and Fidel Castillo, managed by Eddie the Brain Creechman. Together they captured the promotion's tag team titles on September 29, 1969 at the Montreal Forum on the undercard of a Jacques Rougeau-Ivan Koloff International Heavyweight Championship main event. Abdullah's Quebec history is well known, but many old-school fans may not realize that Castillo, while a hated heel, became a legend in his homeland where he was known as Hurricane Castillo. But in Quebec during the late 60s, he was considered as the second top heel in the territory next to Abdullah himself. One of the main reasons Puerto Rican wrestlers began to score huge heel heat in Montreal was usually they were passed off as Cubans. This was during the height of the Cold War, and the infamous Cuban Missile Crisis was less than a decade removed. So Russians and Cubans began slowly replacing the tried and true World War II Nazi German heels. Castillo was really the first of his breed to hit Quebec rings and was probably the most successful. Sure enough, Jacques Sr. was handed the torch following Johnny's swan song in the early 1970s, and all seemed well. 1969 signaled the beginning of a decline in All-Star Wrestling's fortunes. Most of the usual stars were still around, but the company lacked a hot feud to slot in the top of the card. Koloff, Abdullah, and Jacques Sr. were most often the names at the top of the marquee, Wild Bill Curry, Paul Diamond, the mighty Igor, Eric the Red, and the great Kojika all made an impact in that same year, as did returning Dominic DiNucci, but the story of the year was the triumphant return of Maurice Vachon that June from his serious car accident injuries. He was a little tentative in single bouts, but soon settled into a tremendously successful tag team with his brother Paul.